Absolutely. Hello, everyone. Thank you for having me on, Dylan. My name is Demon Mama. Demon Mama Live here on Twitch. Your Demon Mama on Twitter. I am the demon of Twitch debate, or so I've been told. I do a whole lot of political content, a lot of debates, a lot of panels, a lot of dunking on political news and stuff. So if you like any of that, and you want to have a fun community that's very welcoming and also doesn't mind a little bit of debate, you want to come over and join my channel. Again, that's Demon Mama Live, and thank you for having me on. I'm very happy to be here and talking with you all tonight.
Happy to have you here. Now I'm going to throw it over to Last Username to introduce themselves.
Hey there, I'm Last Username. Good to be here as usual. Hey everyone.
Great. Now I know everything I ever needed to know about you, Last Username.
You'd like to know more about me? I don't know.
Well, that's good enough for me. I'll throw it over to CTV.
Good evening, everyone. I am a critically thinking veteran. I'm very happy to be here tonight on the Hippie Dippie podcast with everybody once again. Look forward to having a productive, efficient, and hopefully some good memery content for all. So,
Hey, that's always what any panel host wants. I'll throw it over to Bastiat next.
What up, memers and dreamers? My name is Bastiat. I do politics and memes, and
I can't hear any of you.
we do debates. We have a lot of fun, and it is such a joy to be here on the Dylan Burns Hippie Dippie podcast. My favorite of the Friday night debate podcast. Certainly one of the best, maybe even the best. All right, it's all.
Isn't
good.
it also the only
here.
one?
Hey, who can say? But I love it. And I'm glad to be here, my friend.
Wonderful. I'm gonna maybe have to have somebody come in and help her at a different chats to get her fixed, because I've already extended all my replacements, and I don't exactly know what I'm gonna do.
Oh yeah.
Okay, so I'll figure something out.
135%.
Okay, 1 second. I'm gonna move her into a different chat. Okay, so RGR, you're next.
Oh shit! Hey everyone, my name is Riley. Full name Riley Grace Roshong. You can Google that. You can find me YouTube, Twitch, Twitter, Insta, all that good stuff. Law student. I talk about politics, and I don't know. I do the memes as well. So if you want to get some quality meme content, then you can check out my stuff.
Okay, we're going to start the show without Madman until we can get this audio problem resolved. There's not really much more I can do at the moment. I don't have any other replacements handy. I've already exhausted all of them. So we're just going to have to do our best to do what we can to get her back in game.
Are you taking any walk-on replacements if need be?
I will take a walk-on
if anybody's
replacement
listening,
if need be. Yeah.
If anybody's listening, sounds like we need somebody from a more conservative perspective. If anybody's listening and is interested.
Wonderful. Okay, so let me go through the rules quickly. Number 1, I want people to do their best not to interrupt each other too much, too excessively. If you do so, I will jump in. Number 2, you're not to at each other in the chat. You're not to at other streamers that are currently on the platform in the chat and argue with them in the chat. It'll only escalate the situation and is not for productive dialogue. If you want to say something, you have to say something. Number 3, if you cannot work your way into the conversation, raise your hand. I will write your name down here on my handy little notepad, and I'll try to make sure that you have at some point a period to talk. Number 4, if I didn't already say number 4, there is an intro and an outro period of 1 minute for both intros and outros, where you will all be able to introduce what you believe on the topic without any interruption. If you interrupt people, you will be muted. During the outro period, it is similar rules. Besides that, I think I've gone over just about everything. Also, of course, but this is by the default, stay within the terms of Twitch TOS. Is there anything that I have said today that you don't understand or you need some clarification on? No, we've all been through the ringer before, so I think we should all understand what's going on. Okay, wonderful. Okay, Mr. Geek, if you're here, I need you to jump in the chat with I need get Operation Madman kind of working, because her audio is not currently working. She cannot hear us. So if you could drag her into a different chat and try to figure it out with her, that'd be splendid, because we want to get her thing working so she can participate in the conversation. Okay, so we're going to go to the first topic. Should healthcare have to cover gender reassignment surgery? I will state it one more time. Should healthcare have to cover gender reassignment surgery? Okay, I'm going to start this time in the top right-hand side with CTV.
Well, clarifying question off the bat: are we specifically talking about government or private, or are we leaving that open?
It would be basically, the idea is that should the government mandate companies, or with its own separate thing, if you want a different type of healthcare plan, with its own public option, for example, should that be covered? Should gender reassignment surgery be covered by that?
Okay. Then no, I don't think the government should be mandating that company. Well, I don't know. See, that was a little bit different than what I had read it in my mind to begin with. If you don't mind,
I can bring it back to you if you want.
yeah, if you don't mind.
Okay, got it. I'll start with last username then.
Okay. I mean, I'm generally against government being involved in healthcare at all. I'm an anarchist. So, I mean, I kind of have to make a lot of assumptions to answer this question. I mean, we assume that the government is going to be involved in healthcare and that they're going to cover, and they need some sort of standard for what kind of healthcare they cover. I guess whether they can cover this is going to depend on what that standard is. And I mean, and I guess that's up to, what kind of philosophy are you using to justify the government getting involved in healthcare in the first place? So, I mean, I guess I'm just going to have to punt and say we need to answer that question before I can tell you what I think of this. Because ultimately what I think is I don't think the government should be involved in making these decisions. I think there's no reason for them to intervene in this at all.
Got it. Next, I will go over to Demon Mama.
Yeah, the answer for me is an unequivocal yes. The government should mandate the covering of trans healthcare. And the reason that I believe this is, in my mind, the purpose of government is to protect the people. If we're going to have a health insurance, whether it's private or public, if we're going to use a health insurance system and not some sort of universal coverage system, or even if we do go to a universal coverage system, we should take care of the needs, the medical needs of all of our people, trans or not. The efficacy of gender reaffirming surgery has been well studied. This is a closed issue. This has been decided. Modern science has decided on this issue. It is highly beneficial to trans people to be able to have access to that. And as it currently stands, many, if not arguably most, trans people do not have access to that. So yes, the government needs to, in my mind, make sure that anyone operating within its country is doing so on an equal basis, and that would include protecting and offering coverage to trans people for gender reassignment surgery.
Okay, next I'm going to throw it back over to CTV.
Yeah, I'm ready. I think that for me, I wouldn't want the government. I really don't want the government involved in this process now, right? I feel like the government's involvement with it has driven up costs exponentially, and that coupled with a few other pieces of legislation that have specifically to do with pharmaceuticals, has not done a lot to help the cost of everything. So I wouldn't want government involved at all, as a rule, right? That being said, the fact that government is involved and continues to gain more and more control over specific types of procedures, etc., and it doesn't really leave a lot of room for innovation. It doesn't leave a lot of room for growth, I think, because it's so restrictive. And that specifically when it comes to government mandated healthcare to cover gender reassignment surgery, I don't think that the government should be in the business of doing anything other than providing immediate physical care, and that mental and those other things, depending on what it is. I mean, there would be other things to consider for mental, right? So, no.
Okay, next I'm going to throw it over to Bastiat. Or Bastiat is not going to grab the thing. Okay.
Hey, can you hear me?
Yes, can you hear me?
Okay. Yeah, I'm sorry. My internet just died. So I am back to life though, and ready to answer if you're ready to have me answer. All right. So I think in a fully private free market healthcare system, then no, it would not be the government's business to tell people what to cover and what not to cover. But we don't have such a system. We have a quasi-government system, and for people on Medicare and Medicaid, it's basically, it's a very much involved government system. So in that sense, it seems like you would treat healthcare for trans people, the same way you would treat healthcare for anybody else, which is to say that gender reassignment surgery, which seems to have a serious benefit for people who, people's mental health and well-being. It seems like that would be something you would certainly cover the same way you would cover any other kind of mental health treatment. And I was curious whether we already do this in the United States, and it looks like Medicare has been covering transition-related surgery since 2014. In fact, apparently in 2015, the Medicare Appeals Council issued a decision ordering a Medicare plan to pay for transition-related surgery for a transgender woman because it was reasonable and necessary to treat gender dysphoria. So it seems pretty reasonable to me. To the same degree, it's reasonable for the government to take care of people's mental health care and other health needs generally. I don't really see how it differs from those. It does seem like the bigger question is whether you think government should have a role in healthcare or not. But to the extent it does, then it seems like there's no argument that I'm aware of that you shouldn't, therefore, provide care to transgender people.
Okay, as we have all had our intro segment, except for Operation Madman. Operation Madman cannot hear us at the moment, though, so we're going to go into a general dialogue while we try to... hello?
Hey, did I have an intro segment?
Oh, did I not? Oh yeah, I didn't hand it over to you. I'm sorry. I forgot about that. I'm dealing with a lot of things at once. I'm sorry. RGR, you can go first.
You mean I can go? Anyway.
Sorry, I'm just not in it right now. I'm sorry.
You're all good. You're all good. Yeah. So this became. I've heard it from a couple other people. I wasn't aware this was like a 2-issue system. I thought we were just talking about like healthcare generally, whether it should cover. But we can talk about whether or not healthcare should also be like covered by the government. On the first issue, whether or not it should be generally covered by health insurance, I don't even think I've really heard an argument that it shouldn't, but just to cover the bases, I think that health insurance companies should cover a form of medical care if it is able to demonstrably alleviate a provable harm. This is especially true if access to medical care is normally prohibited by cost barriers, and I'm going to name off a couple of premises. I have evidence to support all of them. If you want to go into them, then let me know. Not only is being transgender an intrinsic quality, not only are there trans people who experience gender dysphoria and that gender-affirming care has been shown to alleviate that gender dysphoria, and not only can it otherwise be necessary to mitigate harm from forms of discrimination in society, and one of the largest barriers to trans people in accessing gender-affirming care is cost, but also providing gender-affirming care has been shown to be affordable and cost-effective for insurance companies and has low budget impact in U.S. society. So I would say that just at the merits of should it be covered by insurance companies, that it overwhelmingly should, whether private or public. Now on to the government issue. I think as a policy matter that your inability to be able to pay for medical necessities should not be the difference between you getting it or not. And I think that that's very questionable to leave to the private sector. The private sector has a profit motive, so it is incentivized to try and price out certain people who it finds to be not profitable. And so when we're talking about people who are trans, the private sector might look at that and be like, oh, well, this person is not profitable. This section is not profitable, and therefore we don't want to give them adequate healthcare in the same way that we would give adequate healthcare to other people. I'd rather that be managed by the government, where we can keep costs low and accessible to people who most need it. So I guess, I don't know, there's the 2 arguments in there, but that's probably my positions on all of them.
Okay, I'm super sorry. I need to step away and deal with something that's currently going on with my household in a second. So can everybody just try to have a productive dialogue for the intro section?
I think we have a pretty mature panel here tonight, Dylan.
Okay, sorry. I have a person canceling out I got to deal with. Sorry. I'll be right back, everybody.
All right. Let's see. Okay. So I guess while I have no objection if the government is already taking care of healthcare, Riley, is your position that if the government was not taking care of healthcare and we had some just free market system that people companies should be forced to cover certain kinds of treatments anyway?
No, I just don't think that it's a great idea to put health insurance into the to be managed by the private sector. I think that when
Okay.
you leave
All
health
right.
insurance to
Get
be
that.
managed by the private sector, that you end up introducing cost motivations to whatever barriers or whatever qualifications people or those companies have to providing those health insurance
Okay.
or that health insurance. And so when you have that, you have like this is an instance where I feel like a government would be better by virtue of the fact that they could keep prices lower prudentially, as opposed to relying on like a market to determine what like a market value of health insurance would be.
Okay, so then for the sake of trying to get this to one issue rather than perhaps two, let me see if everybody agrees or disagrees on this one point. If the government, and so for a hypothetical here, if the government is involved in providing healthcare to people, is there anybody here who, I understand we may disagree whether should be the case or not, but if we all agree that that is the case, is there anybody here who would conclude, well, okay, even in that scenario, I don't think these transgender treatments should be provided? Like CTV, last username, like, again, I know that's a hypothetical that both of you would disagree with by default, but if it were the case that government was covering healthcare costs anyway, do you think that transgender treatments, surgery, therapy, medications, hormone therapy, do you think that stuff should be covered, or is that different in some way and it shouldn't be?
Well, I mean, if you're going to allow that, then where's the line for me? I mean, where's the line? Because at some point there has to be a line. Otherwise, we're going to get to the point to where plastic surgery, right? Go get a nose job. That should be on government-dated healthcare because it helps somebody feel better about themselves. So I'm just curious where the line is.
Well,
The
it's not
line
just
is,
about.
I mean, I can answer that immediately.
All right, let's
Sure, go for
let's hear what the line is.
Yeah, the line is that health insurance companies should cover a form of medical care if it is, 1, able to demonstrably alleviate 2, a provable harm. Transgender affirming or gender affirming care has been shown by numerous studies to be able to demonstrably alleviate gender dysphoria. And also gender dysphoria is a provable harm by it's the overwhelming scientific consensus that like gender dysphoria is something which a sizable number of transgender people face and which gender affirming care demonstrably helps. This isn't the same as like a cosmetic surgery which people just get because they want to.
Yeah.
By the way, am I the only one whose audio is going in and out?
I hear you fine.
You've had a few in and out spots. It's more like a volume variance. I'm catching your volume going down and up quite a lot. I don't know if it's a software thing or
your noise gate.
Is it just me?
Yeah, I think it is.
Yeah, I think it's just
I've been hearing you just fine, man.
Okay, sorry about that. I guess this is the cursed podcast tonight. Sorry about that, folks. Okay, so I think Riley's line makes a lot of sense. I mean, I think that you could then look at, the way that gender dysphoria, like, for example, the Medicaid Appeals Council I mentioned in 2015 said, hey, we apparently make decisions about care on a case-by-case basis. And in this case, we are pretty sure it would alleviate a real, clear, substantial harm. So what do you think about that, CTV?
I just every time I hear about government involvement in something, I just see the number of dollars necessary to be able to do anything, right? And because the administration is there, then you have to work inside their specific framework. There's no way that you could try to accomplish the same things in maybe a much more streamlined manner, right?
There is also, I mean, like there's evidence that providing gender affirming care is also affordable and cost effective for insurance companies and has a low budget impact in U.S. society. Like there's also been studies on the impact and they've overall been like minimal. Right.
Yeah, right. So my point in all of this is, though, when we're talking about anything when it comes to government involvement, right, is as soon as you pass legislation, the government then has the responsibility to the people to actually hire people to make sure that this law is in fact being enforced, right? Otherwise,
right, but right now we're not talking about the government. We're just talking about generally providing gender affirming care. Like we're like assuming already that the government is involved, right?
So
like we're just like the government issue is punted.
Mm-hmm. Right. And we can talk about the government issue afterward. I'm happy to do that too. But I feel like the two issues, like if your point is, I think we should have a very strict standard of care because we're all paying for it. I guess that would be one line that you might draw that would be different. It's like based more on cost than on harm. But like you'd have to make a distinction of some kind. If you're just saying like government shouldn't be involved, that would be a different issue, I guess, from the call of the original question, which was specifically this type of medical treatment.
Right. And it is a very specific type of treatment, right? So like for me, like whenever I would view the government getting involved in something as far as the cost of care for like a mental thing like PTSD, for example, right? There would be something that was possibly criminal that somebody was brought up on charges for, that as a result of their, bad behavior, just to kind of keep it in the, their bad behavior caused this to happen. So they were brought up on charges, found guilty by the government. So then, of course, the government, in order to help that person get over that, should help with the costs of, PTSD and mental health and things. But when it comes to something like this, it certainly seems like that there's got to be at least a choice in there somewhere, right?
What do you mean?
What
What do you
do
mean?
you mean by that?
What do you mean
I
the
have
choice?
to reset everything as my
Yeah, but what do
internet is going out.
Yeah, but what do you mean the choice? Like,
mean-
it's not a choice to be a gender identity. It's not a choice to have gender dysphoria. It's not a choice. People, like, this is a demonstrable harm that people experience regardless of their choices in the matter. And it's a harm that medical care has been shown to alleviate. Like, that's a perfect case for allowing medical care, whether or not provided publicly or privately, to allow that to be covered by health insurance.
Right, but you still have to make a choice to do it, right? It's to
What do you mean a
change-
choice to do it? Like, what do you
to
mean?
change
No. You don't get a choice to have gender dysphoria. There's no choice in there.
Yeah,
You
there's no
have it
choice
or
in
you
that
don't.
matter. Yeah.
Well, I don't think you understand it. Maybe I just don't understand what the surgery actually is. Why don't you explain to me what the surgery is?
There's
and then
multiple. There are many different kinds. Yeah. No. If you actually don't understand, then yeah, I'm taking you in good faith right now. I'm assuming that you don't know. I'm gonna walk you down through it. All right. I'm gonna walk you through it. So there are many different forms of gender affirming care, whether it's hormone replacement therapy, that's taking a series of essentially like versions of hormones, whether it's injection or pills. Those alter the physiology, like largely secondary sex characteristics. Some people choose to get surgeries then. There's a variety of surgeries, whether it's top surgery or bottom surgery. It's usually the way that people generally refer to it. It differs from person to person. Those have been shown by studies to demonstrably alleviate gender dysphoria, which is an extreme visceral discomfort that trans people have with their bodies by virtue of the fact that they were born with a body that the gender dysphoria makes it so that they have like such an incongruence with that it makes it so that they can't really function in society to the same degree that other people can, right? Like it is a mental health issue, And so this gender affirming care, because it's been shown to alleviate that discomfort, that extreme impairment to be able to interact with the rest of society, that's why we say that it's medically necessary, because it's able to help people who otherwise would have extreme troubles doing so to be able to the same degree that you or I or anyone else would want to be able to contribute to society. Because that's all that we're trying to do. We're just trying to make sure that every American is hardworking and contributing to the well-being of everyone else in the country, right? That's all that people want. Does that make sense?
It makes sense.
Yeah, like I want to be able, like you and I, like I see the American flag in the background. You see mine in the background. We both care about the country, right? I want to be able to contribute to it and make it as good as you, I'm sure, want to as well, right? I want to be a hardworking American. You want to be a hardworking American. I just want to make sure that people have the healthcare to be able to do it. That's it.
Yeah, and I mean, I would also point out that there are this was brought up a little bit earlier, that the like plastic surgery is plastic surgery comes up as a response to trans issues relatively frequently. Often, I think, because it does come from a sort of not understanding what procedures are actually done, what therapies are actually offered to trans people. But there are many other forms of plastic surgery that are also necessary. I mean, for example, if you were in like a house fire and your body got burned, you may not be able to participate in society without significant plastic surgery. In fact, you might not be able to live without pain with extensive plastic surgery. And I would put that in the exact same category as a trans person seeking out gender reassignment surgery, something that could offer them incredible pain or the inability to even interact. Like this, these are, gender dysphoria and genital dysphoria specifically, if we're talking about just surgeries, is something that can ruin someone's life. And this is, again, something that's been studied to a great extent. These surgeries have been developed and innovated upon in such a way that it can alleviate that. And I think we should back that. And any company that that purports to be offering healthcare should be willing to participate under those rules as well. In fact, here in the United States for some time, this perhaps maybe touches a little bit on the private versus public thing. We don't really have to dip into that, but I just think it's important for people to realize that here in the States, there was a very long period of time where despite us having non-discrimination laws, trans people were still discriminated against, not given HRT, which is hormone replacement therapy, not given surgeries, not given the therapy that they need. And this was done under the guise of pre-existing conditions, where being trans was considered intrinsic enough to be a pre-existing condition, but not intrinsic enough for them to cover until, I think it was I think that happened when the repeal or the abolishment of pre-existing conditions clauses happened.
Okay. So there are a lot of. I guess my problem is I'm not seeing a clear distinction between what a criteria for deciding what kind of medical things should be covered, because there are a lot of kinds of medical services that would be like a huge benefit, like something like a personal trainer, right? I'd love to have a personal trainer. That would definitely make me healthier, happier. I'd probably live longer. Someone who would, help me exercise and take care of nutrition and stuff. Should that also be covered by public health care?
Well, I think that the issue here, here's where I would make the argument. I don't know, maybe I disagree with Demon Mama. There's probably an argument for that, but specifically with like hormone or like with gender affirming care, I usually make my focus on what has been demonstrably shown, usually through like empiric studies or evidence, to be able to alleviate demonstrably a provable harm, right? Like that's usually where I draw the line as far as like medical care intervention.
Poor nutrition and being out of shape is definitely a provable harm.
Okay, yeah, then, I don't know, then maybe there's an argument there.
Yeah, here's where I would make the argument, just to respond. Excuse me?
Can you guys hear me now?
Yeah, I can hear you now.
Yeah, you're good.
Yeah, I think your mic was cutting just a tiny bit.
If you're talking about like, we do have like healthcare coverage for like personal, I don't know, like sport or like rehabilitation trainers, right? Like those are covered.
Yeah, in fact, at multiple workplaces I've worked at with private insurance, mind you, personal trainers were offered at either a discount or as a part of the plan. So I would say yes. Sure. In many cases, that would be the case. Perhaps not everyone needs a personal trainer, but the thing is we already have structures to verify this. Some are imperfect, of course, but we have ways of doing this. Like say if your doctor says, damn, like my patient is like really struggling with weight for whatever reason, and it's threatening their life. I think that if I was able to give my patient a personal trainer, then I would be able to solve this problem, prevent them from dying, extend their life, have them be a functioning member of society for much longer. And then that would be a perfectly good reason for that to be covered. Would it not?
No.
Okay.
Why not?
What? Because the person has personal responsibility for themselves. If, at some point, that person that decides that they're going to sit there on that couch for, however long to be able to get to the point that they're at, and their doctor's like, if he only had a personal trainer instead of just getting.
Wait, what is personal responsibility?
I just want to
beside the point. I was using this as an example, right?
Just give me a second. I'd like to hear the end of CTV's point. I didn't get to hear it. Well, I didn't get to hear anything because I've been busy, but still, I'd like to hear the end of it.
Well, at some point, there's, you sit there on the couch long enough and you don't move and you eat enough damn donuts. At what point is there personal responsibility for you should have just got your ass up off the couch and went and walked the dogs or something?
But right? You're arguing against my example, not against the actual topic.
Yeah, you are arguing against.
Hello.
Like the purpose of my example, let's say that this person is not going to get in shape without a personal trainer. Let's just assume that's been decided. How much of a threat to their life or their well-being or whatever does it have to be? Because you could probably say that for almost anyone, a personal trainer is going to extend their life a little bit, or increase their reduce some harm, eliminate some harm from their life, right?
Yeah, and also to follow up on that point, like I don't know, I just really, no offense to you, critically thinking veteran, but thank God that you actually don't have any say in this, because doctors are actually quite good at determining what their patients need, and as it turns out, the only reason that
be it for me to think that some
I was
people
talking, but it's okay.
Their own problems
like,
down the road.
All right,
I would like to hear the end of Demon Mama's point, and then I'll let you respond because that was barbed towards you, CTV. I'll bring it back over to you.
Yeah. The thing is that there's not only one reason. I know for some people out there who really hate fat people and think being fat is inherently evil or whatever, that you think that the only way you get fat is by eating tons of true, eating tons of donuts and sitting on the couch. But as it turns out, there's all kinds of things that can cause you to become fat. And in fact, some of the people who struggle the most with weight struggle with that because of things like lymphedema, I think it's called, which is where your legs swell, making it very painful for you to walk at all. And for people like that, being able to have access to a personal trainer or some sort of special facility that helps them deal with that could save their life. Not only could it save their life, once they lose weight, it can make the lymphedema better. Now, far be it from me to like claim that I'm like a doctor, but I think that doctors know what their patients need better than you do. And that's why I would say that we should consider the fact that, hey, if a doctor determines that an overweight patient needs the help of a personal trainer, why shouldn't we have that happen? Especially because coverage already does that to this day.
How long are your sentences? That's what I want to know.
I'm inclined to agree with you that you're right, that doctors like know in terms of like what you need medically, but CTV has a right to have some questions here, given that the other point here is who pays for it. And basically you're saying CTV should pay for it, but he also should, in effect, shut the fuck up with respect to whether the treatment should be provided. And while I am sympathetic to that argument to some degree, I mean, ultimately the taxpayer probably should have some say in terms of how expansive a healthcare plan is, if the taxpayer is ultimately being asked to pay for it.
Yeah, some say.
Hold on. We're back on me now.
Yeah,
right?
I was about to pass it over to you, CTV. That was directed towards you, so I'd like you to have a chance to respond.
Thank you, buddy. All right. So, Demon Mama, damn, you like to make assumptions about people right off the bat, right? Lots of assumptions. Like, why? How was somebody that served 9 years in the U.S. Navy and was an assistant command fitness leader on board the USS Tennessee and was helping shipmates be able to get in shape every motherfucking day know a goddamn thing about keeping in shape? I wouldn't know a damn thing about that, right? You're right. So, and for all those other, people that have health problems, shit, I've got, family members that are going through a bunch of shit having to deal with it anyway. I wouldn't know a damn thing about having to deal with that either, right? See, there you go. That's all you're good for, right? But,
Hey, CTV.
Right. The point is that when you try to start insulting somebody's intelligence to try to get aroused, all you're doing is creating attention-seeking behavior and not even and addressing the point, right? And Bastiat brought it around real good for you, so that's why I'm glad that man had the mic right there, made the point, and now you need to go ahead and be a little bit more respectful when you're speaking to other people.
I'll be about as respectful as other people are on the panel. I do agree. Bastiat did a much better job answering the question or addressing the question than you did. You literally just dove in about fat people sitting on the couch and talking about donuts. And I'm not gonna lie.
Yeah,
that sounds
it
like
was a meme.
No, listen.
I want to hear her respond. I want to hear how she responds to it. You had a time to speak. She has time to speak. I got to be the UN right here.
Yeah, I'm glad that you got to get it out of your system to talk about how you're the best person and you did all this stuff in the military and you trained people and whatever. But that doesn't stop you from clearly having really unhealthy opinions towards people who are overweight. Opinions which actually plays perfectly into my answer to Bastiat, which is, yes, I do agree that in any nation, the taxpayers, the people who, in a democratic nation, you should have some say. However, that doesn't mean you should be able to dictate. There are all kinds of people with all kinds of fucked up views about what is and isn't. I mean, I grew up in a family that literally didn't believe in psychology at all. Sure. They didn't believe that that they believed that parents that like allowed their children to have antidepressants would be like abusive parents. And to me, that's ridiculous. So sure, while they should have a say in the creation of government, it is absurd to say that they should be able to have the sort of personal control over what help other people that they might be totally uninformed on get.
Yeah, I guess the only reason ordinarily I would not be down for government, managing a whole sector of the economy like healthcare. But the only reason I'm so sympathetic to it is that it seems like nobody has ever been able to do a full free market system. I'm not aware of any examples of full free market healthcare in the world today. Really, I'm not aware of any. If they're out there, and maybe last year's name, you can tell me about them. But so it seems like all of the developed countries that have good outcomes have some role for government in healthcare that's very expansive. And that includes the U.S. It's just that we've limited our expansive healthcare to what? Over 65s and under what? 30,000. You make a certain small amount of money, or you're over a certain age, and you get a lot of coverage. But otherwise, you have to either be in the military, or you have to be a veteran, or you have to be a member of Congress, or whatever. So we provide good, or at least public health care to some people. But it just seems like to me if you want to get good healthcare outcomes, all the countries that have good healthcare outcomes have some role, some expansive role for government in healthcare. And I'm not aware of any alternative that is just designed around personal responsibility. And I would like that alternative to exist, because I'm ideologically opposed.
Kind of making my argument,
but I don't know. Like last year's name, is there a model I can look to if I don't like government involvement in healthcare?
No, actually, it seems to be something that has never really been tried properly, not in a developed country. But you're saying that, like, well, it's never been tried because it wouldn't work, which doesn't make sense to me.
I'm not saying that necessarily, but I am saying
that the argument for socialism.
Given that it's never I
I'm
will
just
say
saying,
that
like, I'm not advocating for socialism, but that's the same kind of argument, right? It's like, oh, it's never been tried, in the right way.
Well,
right?
They all say it's never been tried. Of course, it has. But
what, like having a healthcare system that's run by just purely by the private market. I'm just saying, like, it's a very similar kind of argument, right? Like, just saying that, like, it could work conceivably.
One at a time. I can't.
Like, to me, it's very compelling.
It just seems like
give me Bastiat. Both of you. You know the rule. When I speak up, I'm dealing with a lot of stress right now, so I'm gonna ask for everybody to be as cooperative as possible. Okay, so Bastiat, I just couldn't hear you both talking at the same time. I couldn't hear either of the point that was just made. So Bastiat, could you redeclare what you're trying to make here, what the statement you're trying to make?
Just that, look, I would personally prefer if we could have all free market all the time, but I don't think it just doesn't seem to be possible with healthcare. Given, it doesn't seem to be possible with healthcare if we want to have, good outcomes, because all the nations that have good healthcare outcomes have a large role for government in their healthcare system. So, therefore, I just don't think there seems to be another way to do it.
I still don't understand why you would say it's not
better
possible.
system, but. Because it seems like if it were possible, then given all the developed nations in the world and all the incentives for why you'd want to get government out of healthcare, for example, so that you can avoid conversations about, well, what should be covered, what should not be covered. I don't want to pay for this, I don't want to pay for that, right? It seems like there are a lot of advantages there.
Incentives for who? Not for government. Government has
incentives for ordinary people. Like they would be more affordable, it would be better, in some way. I mean, if we could
decide what the government does.
You're throwing, like, let's say what you're advocating is throwing the entirety of, like, a essential commodity, like what people need, to a profit motive, right?
Yeah,
if people need something, then there's not going to be any limitation. What do you mean there's no issue with that? If you're if you need to pay for something,
one person at a time. Okay, RGR, I want to hear first.
If you need something, then people are going to pay whatever they need. I mean, this is the problem with the pharmaceutical company, right? Like, pharmaceutical company recognizes that many limitations on what prices they're able to have for their various medications. So they jack up the prices to the point where people, if they don't have a health insurance, are going to die without it, right? Because they aren't able to afford it.
But the pharmaceutical companies also benefit from a massive government handout in the patent system that allows them not only to create drugs, but then to protect them with, like, a virtual monopoly for a period of 20 years. Whereas if you just said no patents, no government protection, well, in that situation, then it would be very hard to protect your drug monopoly and then charge whatever you like, because once they're out, people could replicate them on their own and sell them on their own at a much cheaper price, like they do with generic drugs.
Right.
Hold on, because I mean, like, this is the same kind of.
Before you get into your CTV, I want RGR to finish your point, and then we'll throw it over to D Mama, who's had their hand up, and then I'll see if I can bring it back around to you. Okay, man? Wonderful.
Yeah.
Okay.
But I mean, like, this is the same kind of policy argument as to why, like, most of I don't know, like, I'm taking nonprofit law. I don't know if you took that when you were in law school, right? Like, this is the same exact kind of policy argument for why, we should let nonprofits handle a lot of, like, the shortcomings of either the private market or governments, right? The problem is that, like, nonprofits and like, when you try to create effectively a vacuum where, in your instance, it's like, well, if we take away these regulations, then other people will step up and take care of it. But the problem is that, like, when you have especially, like, a tendency towards monopoly, where a lot of resources are pooled over, the course of time in the hands of fewer and fewer people, it becomes very hard for people to be able to go out and do those kind of things. You know how hard it is to be able to, like, form an organization or a nonprofit dedicated to actually being able to meet those kind of needs? It's incredibly hard. You can't just go out and form an organization, right?
Yeah,
unless you actually
have and form organizations and businesses. I mean, there are people with capital who invest. I'm not really sure I understand your point.
Money from your rich parents, then sure.
Are you saying that all businesses are started with startup money from rich parents?
I'm saying that's
probably a loan.
I'm saying that's like how predominantly. What I'm saying is that predominantly it's much harder for people without that kind of a startup income to be able to form those businesses as compared to people who don't have them, right? Like, it's predominantly easier, right? I'm not saying impossible. I'm not saying it's impossible. possible. Of course, intersectionality exists. People from all sorts of backgrounds are able to accomplish. Yeah, we get it, right? But like, it's predominantly easier for people who come from backgrounds where they already have a background of a background of wealth to be able to do those things than people who don't. And the people who don't are going to be disproportionately the people who are like adversely affected by these kinds of policy decisions.
Okay,
don't think I understand your point here.
cut before I bring it to you, Bastiat, because see, I think Operation Madman's audio is working now. Am I correct in that assessment?
Yes. Hi,
Wonderful.
everybody.
Hey.
Hi.
Hey,
Hello. Would you like to introduce yourself, and do you know this first topic by chance?
It sounds like you guys are talking about whether insurance companies should have to pay for transgender surgery.
Yes.
Is that
Yes, correct.
Okay.
It seems like the topic has
And
changed.
how are you guys?
Well,
Hey.
I'm doing
Nice
mean,
to
like,
see
now-
some of you again.
Yeah, I believe you know a few people on the panel. Would you like to say who you are and give your take on the topic? Since you are a little late, I'll give you 30 seconds uninterrupted to give your take on this.
I know. I wish that I had been able to hear more about what you guys already had to say. I'd probably be repeating some points of view already, but no, well, okay. I'm Operation Madman. I do some political streaming and some other stuff here on Twitch. Like, I just recently did a Russian stream where we were learning how to speak Russian together and do some guitar playing and yada yada. Also, I do not believe that insurance companies should have to cover any type of medical treatment at all, including transgender surgery. So that's my take.
Wait, I just need to make sure that you said it right, because this is an interesting take. That health insurance companies shouldn't have to cover.
Well, don't get Riley. Just don't get
Well,
too
no,
distracted because what we had earlier, right?
Yeah, I want to talk about the
Well,
personal responsibility take. I'm interested in that. I'm interested in the personal responsibility bit.
I
But
I understand.
I've got a
I'll
question for you.
There's
for the
different
lawyer.
levels of
CTV.
health. There's different levels of health insurance coverage
I
all over
will-
the place.
I will 100% make sure that the topic is brought back to you, CTV, so you can make a point on that. And Demon Mama, I haven't forgotten. I got a notepad. This is why I brought the notepad in here. The notepad is the law of the land, okay? This is the holy book on which builds the foundation of the Hippie Dippie podcast. So, Riley, I do want you to respond to what Madman just said because I don't want to have any point kind of just go into the wind. And I will bring it to CTV and Demon Mama again. It's just, everybody wants to have a period to talk.
Yeah, so I really just want to understand the argument. So, and again, I just want to make sure I hear this because, like, I think I misheard this, but I don't know, maybe I didn't. Are you making the argument that health insurance companies shouldn't cover any surgery or any medical procedure at all? Like, is that what I heard, or did
No.
did I
They
mishear?
shouldn't have to cover, because I believe that's how the question was worded. They shouldn't have to cover any specific surgeries at all.
Wait,
period.
why? That's
do.
literally their job. That's what they do. That's like
Because
that's their whole purpose. That's why you
insurance
pay for them,
and-
whether it's private or public.
They have different layers of coverage, and
What do you
you
mean
pay into it.
Well, I think
So
she's
when-
saying that. Sorry, just
Well,
the government shouldn't
when you
be forcing you to do one thing or another, right?
Right. So, I mean,
Okay.
when you buy dental insurance, you will see that some insurance companies will cover a root canal and some of them don't. And insurance companies shouldn't have to cover root canals if that's not what they want to cover.
Okay, why?
Because I don't believe that any insurance company should have to do anything.
Yeah,
If
but I
you
want to know
insur-
why. Like,
if
what's
you
the
want-
bottom
if you-
justification?
Because
you think
there's
that
other
there's, like,
insurance
com-
companies.
Well, I'm going to hear the answer first. What's your answer to that? I didn't get to hear that.
So, for example, if that's something that you want, then you can go and get it elsewhere.
All right, what if no insurance companies have it?
There are places that do cover it.
Yeah, but
I
all right,
mean,
I
it's
want to.
not-
All right,
it-
now I want to
there
ask
are
you the question.
places that offer this service. It's not something that does not exist.
Hold
Well,
on.
that's
you know how
actually funny that you mentioned that because that isn't actually true when it comes to trans healthcare. In fact, for a very long time, insurance companies did not cover it at all. If you wanted to have gender reassignment surgery, you either had to be lucky enough to live in one of the states that early had a government step in and demand that it be covered, or you had to pay for it in cash, which is a cash surgery is unbelievable, and almost no trans people are able to come up with that money offhand. So it's actually not true, the idea that like somebody's going to do it. They're not necessarily going to.
And sorry, Demon, I just really want to know like what Madman, like, do you mind if I really want to learn about like what your beliefs are about like healthcare, right? Because I think it's a lot more interesting than like, I don't know, some of the other perspectives, right? Do you think that healthcare companies should be able to choose, broadly speaking, whatever they want to cover?
Yeah, I don't believe that any company should be forced to do anything.
Okay, do you not think, all right, then let me ask you the question. Considering that like healthcare, as compared to something like buying shoes, would be considered by a lot of people to be a medical necessity, right? Something that people need to live. Do you think that offers any kind of like additional onus on health insurance companies to provide additional things which could save lives, demonstrably does save lives, as opposed to just like a shoe company, I don't know, deciding not to sell like shirts?
Sure, I think that would be really disingenuous for me to say not to. Yeah.
Okay, cool. So I mean, like that with that logic, because there is plenty of evidence that gender affirming care does demonstrably help trans people, especially like alleviating gender dysphoria, saving lives. Like there's overwhelming
I don't
evidence
know.
to that
There's
effect.
been some really interesting studies that have shown that, like, for example, excessive hormone treatment has actually caused people to like
Do you have any
have
citations?
I don't know.
Because I mean, like I can
did
like,
I
like
think it
this
was
is not a
the
battle that you want
cohort
to fight.
study that showed. I don't know. I thought it was the cohort study showed that there was an increase in morbidity with it was heart disease, I think it was, or was it the Canadian study? I'm not
So I
sure.
can
I
cite
can look
6
it up.
studies
I
right
do
now
have.
that show overwhelmingly that gender affirming care demonstrably helps trans people. Like I can
No,
give
no,
you
no.
6 right
I'm
now.
actually talking about how hormone treatment. I'm not talking about
Yeah.
like the happy good feelings. I'm actually talking about how like
No, it does.
actually could.
Yeah. No,
The
we're talking about
happy
the same
good
things.
feelings.
We're talking about the
Yeah,
same
how
things.
it actually can. And that's not a bad thing. I'm not talking. I'm not trying to that wasn't trying to be a nasty
I mean,
like
it's
shot
kind of
at
you're
anyone.
either like
That's
not, you either don't know about this or you are being disingenuous. So I'm trying to figure out what it is. If you don't know,
no,
then
no,
that's
no.
fine. We can go
That
over the
wasn't trying
evidence.
to be nasty. I'm
Okay.
actually that. Just so you know, I'm not like a fucking like person that
Okay,
is
fine. Then I
any
can
sort
send you
of a
literally
bigot.
every study
What I'm
showing that
saying
it
is that
overwhelmingly helps people, and we can walk through them. We can do that.
So there have been studies that show that hormone treatment actually does lead to heart problems.
Do you
So
have a
what I'm
citation for
saying,
that?
like
Can I
like
see
I
it like
said,
right now? I want to see it right now.
okay, if you give me a
Okay,
minute,
this
I can
is
look it
this
up
is
on my
getting a
laptop.
little.
Well,
I
listen.
will. Oh, give me a second. Give me a
I
second.
can look
Give me a
it up
second.
on my laptop and
Give me a
send it
second.
to you
I
if
want
you
to
want.
give me a second. Okay, so she will take some time to look it up since she
If you want.
has said she will. I know that Demon Mama and CTV wanted to talk about something earlier. Both had their hands up and they wanted to comment. First, I'm going to go to Demon Mama and then CTV right after. So Demon Mama, I'm going to start with you.
Yeah, it's been a little bit since we were talking about the points that we were talking about before, but I just wanted to add some context to what we were talking about before, which is that there are huge problems in privatization of many necessities. Not just this idea that like healthcare is the only one that is really good to have public. I mean, we have huge swaths of food deserts in the United States, and we've had nothing but cuts towards our food programs. But I guess that's kind of a different conversation at this point. And I would just like to point out at this point that what we're talking about here, this idea that like, oh, there could be other potential negative health side effects that come along with hormone therapy. That's true about any drug, literally any drug. Insulin is necessary for someone with diabetes to live, but it has other side effects. There are all kinds of side effects of any drug that you take, but the side effects aren't necessarily the only thing that matters. The side effects might be very, very minor or very small cases. Nearly any drug can do that. In fact, hell, there are negative things from over-the-counter medications like aspirin and. Yeah.
But I think insurance companies have the right to take that into consideration. Do they
Well,
not?
I mean, into
If there's-
consideration is one thing, but deny it outright is another.
Well, I guess the question is like, where's the rationale? Like, what is the? I'm with you folks on like basically everybody who agrees with me that public health care leads to better results than this free market alternative that doesn't exist. I'm with all the folks that agree with that. But I guess I don't think there's any like moral right to force an insurance company to cover something or another. I just concede that it probably leads to better outcomes. So if Operation Madman's point is, look, I don't care whether it leads to better outcomes or not, you don't have the right to tell me what to do, and that's that. Well, that's a point that I can also get behind. I just
there has
think
to be
ultimately,
limits to that, though, right? Like,
no,
there
the
has
limits
to be
are,
limits.
well, no, I don't know. I mean, it depends on what you're talking about. If you're saying you have the right to extract money from me for something that will lead to better outcomes, I don't know that that's something that I would always concede to.
Well, let me try and give you.
You're dropping something really big. You're dropping a real big point here. I would agree
let me
with
just
you
offer an alternative.
Well, let me finish my point here. I would agree with you in the sense that you are probably right that you would get better outcomes from doing everything that you're talking about here. But I'm still saying, nevertheless, I think you could consistently argue that, hey, I don't care about the better outcomes because you don't have a moral right to put your hand in my pocket for your social project.
Well, true, but I mean, I don't even know if that's the question we're discussing. I mean, I think you could make that argument, and I would be able to contest certain portions of it, or perhaps all of it, depending on the framework of the discussion and how it goes. But I think the problem that we have here is, like, I think there's another problem with that sort of, or with the currently proposed thing. I don't know if there's, I don't know if we're going to go into a morality discussion, but there is an issue, which is that if a health insurance company is supposed to cover your health, but they're picking and choosing which people they don't want to cover, that becomes an issue for the entire industry. In the same way that, say, like, I'm getting a little bit of an echo here. It's a little odd. But in the same way that, like, yeah, somebody's echoing. Oh, I think, Bastiat, I think your mic is open on Whereby.
Sorry.
There we go.
Fixed.
Yeah, no worries. In the same way that, like, we surely have some reasonable limits. Like, for example, if you bought a loaf of bread and it blew up on you, you might be able to go, hey, like, this company sold me a loaf of bread and it's not a loaf of bread, it's actually a bomb.
Yeah,
likewise, in the same way, if somebody offers you health insurance and then all of a sudden it's like, oh, actually, we're not going to cover your actual health. We're gonna cut you out for whatever reason. Doesn't that undermine the entire system of health insurance?
The way it works is the insurance company will list in advance the things that they cover, and that's part of the contract that you sign.
Yeah, like, so if they violate the contract, or if somebody sells you bread that explodes, you would sue them for the harm they caused. And again, I'm not saying this is the ideal scenario here, but I'm saying if Operation Madman's point is, look, I don't care, I just want to, I don't want you to tell me what to do, and I don't think you have the right to tell me what to do, I wouldn't argue that will always lead to the best outcome, but I mean, that's a consistent alternative argument.
There's another problem too, though, real quick, that is on the same thing. I don't mean to cut you off. I just want to pin this on, which is that health insurance is a little bit unique, right? Because you don't know what health problems you're going to have in your life. You don't know what health problems you might have right now. So are you expecting that that in a health insurance situation that literally you just get plopped a book, a dictionary the size of to the moon of every possible condition, and you have to predict which ones you might or might not get? Surely this is irrational. That's a rational way of conducting business.
I agree that would not lead to better outcomes.
After Bastiat answer this question, I want to throw it over to CTV. He's been waiting very politely.
Okay. I agree that wouldn't lead to better outcomes. That's why I don't advocate a system like that. But I do understand somebody who says, look, I don't really care. I just don't want to pay for it. I don't want to pay for your health care because I just want to, I'm not interested in the best outcome for society writ large. I'm interested in maximizing my individual freedom. And therefore, that's that.
Okay, CTV, you're next.
All right. So we have went all the way around this whole gambit. And we were still back in the middle of, since the system is set up the way that it is, right? I think the only thing left to talk about in and amongst all of it is what the requirements should be before the government, like what type of things should these people that are having these issues, what level of diagnosis, how long are they showing their commitment to their decision, because a major surgery, like you said earlier, Riley, top bottom, right?
Yep.
That's a pretty big commitment, right? Because now you're allowing somebody to cut on you with a blade, right? I think that's a pretty big commitment. So,
I mean, like, people get the idea without like going into details. Like, yeah, it's a surgery.
right.
You know?
So it's a surgery. So it's so is it just one of those things where you can just decide one day you're going to walk in there without anything and you just say, okay, I'm ready to do
We
this?
leave it to medical professionals primarily. Like, we leave it to experts.
But still, there's a question there.
Can I speak to this? Because I can speak from personal experience on this with a private health insurance company, mind you. Is that all right if I just jump in here and talk about it? Because I had a gender confirming surgery a couple of years ago, and the experience that I had to go through was dehumanizing, to put it nicely. And this is with one of the better private health companies for trans care in the country, in one of the better states for trans health care. Not only, despite the fact that I had been on hormones and had my own doctor sign off on it, my endocrinologist sign off on it, I also had to get 2 further independent psychoanalyses from psychologists. Couldn't just go to a therapist. I had to go to psychologists and be analyzed for my sanity of mind before I was able to get a surgery that I'd already been talking to my primary care doctor, my specialist endocrinologist, and my own mental health care therapist about. So the current standards right now are absurd to begin with. But I can assure you that if somebody's getting to that point, there are very few people who are just going to take something on like that frivolously without ringing any bells in the medical community. We have a highly medicalized system, a system that has an incredible amount of checks and balances, an amount, I would argue, that is absolutely inhumane. The amount of shit that I had to pay out of pocket, the amount of stuff that I had to sit through, the amount of questioning I had to go under, deep intrusive questions about, oh, did you dress up this way when you were a kid? Ooh, I'm going to check mark this off as that's a point against you or that's a point for you. It's a horrifying process. And that's the way it runs. That was the way it ran 5 years ago. 5 years ago, that was the process that we go through. So I assure you, there is no shortage of gatekeeping that is done when it comes to getting trans surgeries. And keep in mind, mine was a more minor one.
Like CTV in the example I provided, like they had to go before a board to basically get the Medicare program to pay for it. So it's not like you just say, okay, I want the surgery. Okay, government writes the check.
Well, I think it's a good question, though, because there's qualifications.
Well, a lot of people kind of raise this
out, right?
Well, a lot of people raise this kind of issue, but the problem is that like it's a strong, like this isn't a real issue, right? A lot of people make very similar issues about like trans youth. Like this is very similar, like a trans exclusionary radical feminist talking point. Like, oh, they're giving the 5-year-olds hormones. They're injecting kids with hormones and giving them and lobbing off their genitals or whatever. But no one is doing this, right? Like no one is doing this. The worst that people will do is they'll go to a psychiatrist and they'll be like, all right, come back in a couple of years. We'll give you like some hormone blockers and that's probably it. Right, like what you're talking about is like, yeah, if it was something that was happening, it'd be like it'd be a real concern, but it just doesn't.
I don't know.
CDV, do you think the government should have any role in healthcare?
Well, to the point that we are now,
like any role. Like if so, what role should it have?
Well, specifically for physical, right? If you get into a car accident, any number, fall out of a tree, break a leg, go to the emergency room, but it's one of those things where
so let me ask
your body will continue to exist, right? If you don't put things into it, unless it's been actually prescribed, right? So I don't know, maybe I just have more of a naturistic viewpoint where whenever I have really needed to grab a hold of myself, right, and go, what am I made of? Like, what is the shit? I take my ass up to the mountains in North Carolina and I go, camping out in the woods for a few weeks in the wood, and I just do what I do out there, right?
Hold on, wait, Bastiat, I really need to follow up
that's
on this.
my relevant experience.
No,
well, I'm trying to understand.
Let me give it a try.
Well,
I want to follow up on this too, Bastiat. If you want to go for it, then you can go for it.
I'm just give it a try. Look, suppose, all right, look, here's the thing. Here's what I don't get. All right, you're saying basically, okay, car crash, something physical, I'm willing to pay for it. but this trans stuff, I'm not willing to pay for it. I mean, why don't you just go up to the mountains, right? And I guess what I don't get fundamentally is, look, maybe that's not what you meant to say, but it sounds like what you're saying is, look, if you're feeling like a girl, why don't you go hang out for a few days and see if it's for real, okay? And while I think that's, pretty reductionistic, all right, to say the least, I think the issue that I just don't fundamentally understand about what you're saying is, why is it that, I'm willing to pay for your treatment in this case, but in this case, I don't think it's legit? I don't understand how you can really come to that conclusion when ultimately there are a multitude of a variety of different treatments that are complex and nuanced and vary from person to person. And if you are willing to accede to the notion of doctors making decisions about whether a patient should receive a certain form of treatment or not anyway, why would things be any different with the issues facing transgender people? Again, if you're already saying that the government should be involved in these situations, I don't see what's different here.
Well, the part that really gets me is the surgery, right? Because that is a major commitment.
What does it matter?
Well,
What does it matter?
It matters,
I
right?
had my
Explain
gallbladder
how.
out. That was a major commitment.
It's not like
I would
it
like to hear
goes back-
CDV explain himself.
It's not like it goes back the other way. So you got to really be
Yeah,
committed to
any surgery that you
Right,
have
so
doesn't
for
go back the
me-
other way.
I want
Say
to
that-
hear. I really want to hear him finish his statement first before we got any response.
So for me, when we're talking about government involvement, right? Because that's ultimately where we're talking about taxpayer dollars, et cetera, right? Demon Mama pointed out the
literally did.
process of the check boxes. They're asking questions and how important, but that's very personal information that you're having to reveal to complete strangers, right? To be able to get the government involved, which is ultimately going to be something that's going to happen. Other people have to be involved with that, because there's taxpayer money involved. So there's no way to just issue a check and not have any checks. You got to do that.
What is the difference
that's
between
what-
that and literally any other medical necessity surgery, right? Like, it is a medically necessary surgery. Like the overwhelming academic consensus and the overwhelming medical consensus is that it's medically necessary. Why not have? And again, like, the government private
Right, so for
distinction
me,
doesn't
the
really
question-
matter here,
Right.
right?
So
Like,
for
why
me,
does
the
it
question-
matter whether or not it can go back?
Right. So for me, the question is it how long should somebody say have to be committed to this before we do the surgery? Right.
We
Is it
already
like
have
a
like
period of
years
5
wait
I
lists.
don't know. I'm literally just trying to ask a
Well, then I
question,
can-
and
no,
it
no, I
feels
will
very
answer the
fucking heated
question.
in the room, right?
Yeah, because like you're acting like these are questions we don't have the answers to, but literally we have. The
I
answers
don't
right
have
now.
the answers to
Well-
them. That's why I'm
well-
asking a fucking question.
Well,
Okay, cool. Then can you listen?
First, I would like to say that if it feels heated, hopefully you have an air conditioner. Maybe you should turn up the knob a little bit.
Dude,
That'd be helpful.
let's just go to the mountains,
true.
man.
Yeah,
Come
we'll go
on.
to the
Guys,
mountains.
the
It's
mountains,
chilling
man.
in the mountain. It's all nice and chilling up in the mountains and the springs and shit. Okay, so RGR, I know you wanted to make a point there.
Yeah.
Bring back to you.
Right. No, we literally already have, and kind of like Demon Mama said, and mind you, we already have limitations on how long people have to wait to be able to do these certain like gender affirming procedures, like what you're talking about. We already have them. For the average person to get any kind of like invasive surgery, the wait is usually at minimum 2 years, right? Like usually that's like, and mind you, that's before you can even see a doctor. I'll talk about, actually, you know what, like, fuck it. I have my own experience. I can talk about my experience. I had to be first on HRT, hormone replacement therapy, for 2 years before I could even talk to a doctor. And now that I've talked to a doctor, I have to wait for another year after the already first 2 years. And that's after I've gotten 2 different letters from other therapists signing off that I have gender dysphoria and that I need this medically necessary treatment to be able to alleviate my gender dysphoria, to be able to do that. So it's only after I've been on HRT for 2 years and after I've seen not one, but 2 different doctors who sign off that I need this, and after I've talked to the surgeon, after I'm waiting another year until I can get this, right? Like the idea that people can just like decide one day that they want to get this and walk into a surgeon and be like, hey, I want to have my, whatever done, right? Like it's just not realistic. It doesn't happen to anyone.
That's why I'm asking, because I don't know.
All right, well, that's how it
You know
works.
what I mean?
Overwhelmingly.
Maybe there's somebody that's watching this, sometime and they go, well, I don't know about this stuff either. So you know what? I ask those questions in the hopes that I get real answers and not be, combative behavior. Right.
Well, does
That's
that help?
where my mind goes, because I'm just not only considering myself and the people in the room, but anybody else that's watching. So what are those questions that might could be asked? So
Yeah, does that answer all of your questions? I mean, we can go through whatever questions you have. Like, if you actually are trying to learn, you're asking them in good faith. We can walk through whatever you don't know. I'm more than happy to, and I'm sure Demon Mama is as well. Given that you want to raise your hand.
It's because at some point there's when the government starts picking up that tab because it's government mandated. So then it's like, is there a pattern of behavior? That's all I'm asking. And
yeah.
And if that's
we only prescribe those surgeries when people overwhelmingly show that they are medically necessary, right? The same way that if someone gets into a car wreck and it's medically necessary for them to get a surgery to save their life, it's only when there's an overwhelming amount of evidence to show that trans people need surgeries to save their lives that we give them those surgeries, at least when it's covered.
But see, that's where my point would probably go way off in the other direction, because I do believe in people's ability to choose what they want to do for themselves. I believe in free will.
What do you mean?
I really believe that.
No, all right. What do you mean? What do you mean choose for themselves? Because you're implying that like whether or not you choose to get a surgery is like a personal choice, and that it actually isn't based in like alleviating some kind of demonstrable harm.
No, I get that these people have a mental condition.
Don't say these people. Right? You're talking about me. All right. Just like when you say these people, just talk about me. All right.
And you're talking about me too. Yep.
Okay, so there's a mental condition associated with it, right? So it's not
called dysphoria. Yeah.
Okay, so I guess
this is the thing.
Right?
It's okay to like not know some of these things, especially these things that are like very well established. Again, like decades we're talking of established science, of established research from many nations, all working together, people coming together and coming to scientific consensus as this process works. It's okay to not know those things. But what's not okay is to not know those things and then come onto a panel and suggest, why don't you just go for a walk in the woods in response? And that's part of a harmful culture that has been built up around trans people that's denied us care, that has caused us immediate harm.
Here's the question then for me is like, if somebody hasn't been diagnosed with anything, then they can be assumed to be quote unquote normal. Right. And when they don't have any restrictions.
Whoa, dude. I mean, literally. All right. Let me ask you a question. I mean, all right, like, I'm gonna build a bridge to you. All right, I'm really trying with you right now. I'm really trying with you.
We will bring it back to CTV after, so I can finish the point though.
Okay, CTV, you're a veteran. You know plenty of people who have served who have mental issues, right? You wouldn't say that any of them are not normal by virtue of having those mental issues, right? And you wouldn't say that those people can't just go for a walk up in the mountains to get rid of those same mental issues.
Getting hung up on language and then interrupting me to then start down this little tirade is inherently disrespectful.
How is it inherently disrespectful? You're just drawing lines between, this kind of mental health we care about, but this kind we don't.
On the language in which I'm using to try to explain my fucking ideas.
Oh, wow.
Right?
Hey, maybe you need to go for a walk in the mountains to calm down a little bit.
Maybe I do need to go for a fucking walk in the mountains. Maybe that's exactly what needs to happen.
I'm just trying to explore like why you care about certain mental health and you don't care about other mental health.
You know what?
You want to go? You want me to punch you in the mountains?
Look. The next donation goal at Dylan Burns TV is going to be for a group trip for all of us to go up in the mountains, and we'll leave once this COVID shit is blown over. Okay, that's the plan.
There we go. I like that idea.
Amazing. Yeah, but I don't know. It seems like you just care about certain mental health and not others. But I don't know.
Well, you guys have a walk in the mountains. I just want to point out something to bring the kind of two topics together. I say if you want to live in a society where gender reassignment surgery is covered by insurance, then I'd say you want to live in a society with free market healthcare. The reason is in a free market, you can choose what health insurance policy you want to buy, and you are free. I mean, both parties are free to put whatever conditions on that policy that they can come to an agreement to. So if there's a demand for a particular treatment, any kind of controversial treatment to be covered, then there's an incentive for someone in the market to provide policies that cover that procedure. On the other hand, if you have a public healthcare system where the government is set to some extent has to choose for everyone what is covered by insurance and what isn't, then you might get lucky and that controversial treatment will be covered, or you might not. And if it's controversial, I mean, it's going to be a battle at best.
Here's the thing, Mama.
Before all the socialists listening to this rage against what last username just said, let me remind you that what he said has never actually been tried. All right?
Thank you, Bastiat.
I mean,
Yeah.
but we
can
have
get
had
supplementary insurance,
Well, let him finish.
even if you have public healthcare, but it's going to be competing with the free government healthcare. So you are going to have to pay more to get supplementary insurance to cover something than that the government doesn't cover, and more than you would in a society with completely free market for insurance, right?
Still can't figure
the
out
free
why you're not
market gives you more
socialist.
choice and is good, generally a good thing for getting new kinds of treatment covered by insurance in general.
A couple of really quick questions. So the first, what if those kind of procedures aren't profitable enough to be able to offer an accessible at an accessible level for the average trans person?
What, not profitable for who? For
the healthcare insurance company.
Well, you're going to have to pay for, at a level that makes it profitable for the insurance companies. That's true.
Yeah. So what if you
inside of
price out?
insurance.
Yeah. So what if like there's a decent amount of trans people who just aren't able to pay for it?
I mean, if you can't pay for insurance at all, then you won't get covered by insurance.
what he's saying is
that's
you
kind of the
die.
problem.
That's
Yeah,
what he's
so
saying.
you die.
He's saying you
yeah,
die.
that's kind of the
Right. So, I
problem
mean-
with private health insurance in general, right? Is that like when you leave it to the private market, then there are going to be some people who aren't able to pay for it because they're more concerned with the profit motive. Like
Yeah,
that's,
that's the
issue.
part that we
Okay.
don't get to frequently in this
Why-
conversation.
Well, we get to that.
Well,
Wait,
we definitely get
I
to
would,
that.
I've had my hand up for a while now.
Well,
I just want to ask one question.
Okay, you ask a question, and then
Hold
I
on.
want to
Can I
transfer.
respond to that first?
Okay, yeah, but yeah, to be fair, yeah, you should be able to respond. Then CTV, you ask a question, then somebody will answer the question, and then I will address the next thing. Okay, go.
Okay, so yes, the alleged benefit of public healthcare is that people who are poor can get it, right? You don't have to. It's guaranteed to everyone in a sense. Doesn't mean that you're not paying for it. Everyone is paying for it in a sense. Like
Everyone's paying
for taxes.
demonstrably less. I mean, you're probably paying like $1 more per person. Cheers.
Well, it's just the cost is redistributed. So if someone can't afford it, then someone who can afford it ends up paying for that person. So it's
like
moving the cost.
I don't know,
around.
probably $1 extra per person. Yeah.
It depends entirely on the person and what you're paying.
I mean, I actually cited a study earlier that like the increased cost would probably be about like $1 or so.
$1 for
per
what?
person.
What do you mean
Like
specifically?
if insurance companies were to implement like gender affirming care across the board, so that there's no like dispute within the market, so that you don't have like a monopoly on trans healthcare, right? Like if all of them were to implement it.
And what?
Yeah.
I don't know what. I think
Like
you're talking
in
about
like how
something
much
different.
people pay for like how much a person pays like monthly for gender affirming care, right?
Okay, so if you're saying your premiums only go up by $1 to cover this surgery, so
Well, yeah,
that
I mean
means,
like that, there's not that many trans people, but like surgeries do per trans people cost like a decent amount, right?
right.
But I
so
mean
if
like
it's that easy to add this to a policy, then in a free market, it should be pretty popular. Like
except like in the free market, if you have like, all right, let's say that there's only one or two companies that cover trans affirming healthcare, right? Because the other companies don't think it's profitable enough that everyone does it, right? And then those one or two companies actually cover it.
$1 because it's so rare.
Well, yeah, but except
So-
people can artificially increase the price if like the demand is there, right? Because like this is medically necessary healthcare, right? So if you leave it to the private market, then even though it
But
would
if the
be
demand
like
is there and it's cheap to provide,
Hold
then
on a
you'll get
second.
it.
There's another way of looking at this, which is that we've already seen this happen once. So while we've never seen a truly free healthcare situation, we've never lived in an ANCAP utopia where you have to sign a document that goes from here to the moon listing every single possible disease. We've never seen that sort of society. What we have seen, though, is a society that is ideologically opposed to the existence of trans people, and therefore companies recognizing that trans people, they may not even know they exist. But
In that
let's be
society,
real.
you're not going to get
I'm not
covered
done
by
yet.
public.
I'm not done yet.
Public healthcare is not
I'm
going
not-
to
I'm
cover
not
it.
done.
I would like to hear Demon Mama finish. And I would like to
Thank you,
restate
Dylan. I
one of one of the most important rules on the channel. So when I speak up, the reason I'm speaking up isn't to give anybody like a punch in the face and bloody their nose. It is to drag the conversation in a certain direction. Demon Mama, please finish, and unless you
Thank you,
you'll be
Dylan.
able to comment right after.
Okay. Yeah. The thing is that we've already seen in a society where we don't even have a completely free healthcare system, but we have one that is arguably closer to the free market than existed in the past when pre-existing conditions, for example, were allowed to be at the discretion of the corporation. We saw that trans people were not covered. Trans people would be written out. In fact, the only way trans people got care on their coverage is if their doctors dodged it by prescribing them things for different reasons, like say HRT for acne. This is something that happened all over the place. This is well documented. So the private market doesn't do a particularly good job of addressing the problems of small minority groups. Being trans does not end your life at all, but obviously I'm streaming for a whole bunch of people. People get value from my existence, all kinds of stuff. but it's not like a condition that you die at birth or anything like that. However, it has a huge impact, and I can tell you from, of course, personal experience, but also from the data that exists that has been collated over years and years and years, or collected over years and years and years, that being trans and not getting treatment for that can cause an incredible amount of suffering and can severely impact your life goals. With that in mind, despite the fact that they're a minority of the population, and we know that corporations won't necessarily be able to make a profit off that minority of the population, the private market doesn't have an answer for that. It doesn't have an answer because we know that they won't do it if it's not profitable. It won't be profitable if there's only a handful of people.
See,
but I do have a question though.
Minorities of people are exactly who get screwed in a politically provided service, public health care, where what the list of things that are covered by the government is going to be decided by the majority, by the popular vote. Okay, if the policy that you want is unpopular, the policy you want is unpopular, it's not going to happen in a public system.
I will say that's simply not true. Last year's name is a very fair point that there are a lot more folks out there who are probably, in terms of voters, the folks thinking of, along the lines of CTV probably outnumber trans people. So in a pure government system,
on the other hand, in a private market, you can have, if one insurance company says, hey, I think there's a small but worthwhile market here for providing this particular special kind of tailored insurance for people who are concerned, who want this particular thing covered. If there's just enough people to make that a worthwhile thing for them to go into business to, which doesn't have to be a lot, can be a very small minority, then it can happen. There's an opportunity for that to happen.
I mean,
you can respond, and then after you respond, I got to throw it over to CTV.
Okay, that's fine. I just want to be able to respond to this because here's the thing. While I will agree that if we were in a 100% direct democracy, majority rules, it's not even close to the system that we live in, even in our imperfect democracy here in the United States. But if that were the case, that probably would be problematic. I don't really advocate for that type of system. And it's funny because as it turns out, the closer we get to last username system historically, the worse outcomes are for trans people. Because as it turns out, we have increasingly public systems all over the country. In fact, all of the states, really weird, that have really strong public health programs, Washington, Oregon, California, New York are a few examples, Vermont. These are states that have very strong public health infrastructure. All of those take care of trans people. And the ones that don't, the states that are the worst, are the ones with the most privatized care. It seems to be that people will find just about any excuse to screw over a minority when they have that sort of power.
Okay, so can I?
Yes. First, I need to thank a small creator. I want to give a shout out to help him get up on his. Pull him up by his bootstraps. Bastiat for raiding me.
Yeah, thanks for that, buddy. I apologize. My stream is falling to pieces, and my internet's going to hell, so I have to duck out. But I want to send everybody over because this is a really good debate. CTV, last year's name, Demon Mama, and Riley Grace Roshong. It has been such a pleasure, Madman. I'm not sure if you're here or not, but it is always a pleasure seeing you as well. This is a good debate, so I hope everybody sticks around. I wish I could.
Thanks, Bastiat.
I'm right off my phone, and it's all falling to pieces.
Dude,
so,
Bastiat, I wish you would just make sure you watch, because I'm about to make a really, really good point. Okay?
I'm going to see if I can fire it up on my phone and listen. All right, so give me 5 seconds. All right, thank you all so much. Right. Dylan, have a good night.
CTV, I hope you amaze me to the point where you send me into the mountains. Okay? Let's do it.
Well,
send me into the mountains.
So, it certainly seems that we are at the point where that it's being said that getting this surgery / treatment is necessary to this person to be able to save their life. Is that correct?
Yeah. That's what the data shows.
Okay. Right. Okay. So in order to save this person's life, they must have this surgery, right? So at the point of their diagnosis, would it not stand to reason that in order to save their life, that we should also remove their rights to a weapon?
I'm sorry, what?
I'm sorry, what?
Yeah, this is a very interesting argument. Hey, I wasn't expecting it, but go ahead and explain.
Well, if the whole idea is that this is medically necessary for these people to have in order to save their life, at the point of diagnosis, you would want to take every step necessary to protect that person, and I would remove their gun rights They should not have a weapon because I would
So wait,
not.
wait.
want
The
them to
argument
hurt
is
themselves.
hold on. The argument is that someone might be a danger to themselves, or other people might be a danger to them. Because mind you, it's not just that person might be a danger to themselves, but also that like they might be mistreated by larger society, right? Like there's also an argument that gender affirming care is necessary to be able to function in a society where it's otherwise a danger to be in society where you might otherwise be the subject of discrimination by people who want to take me for a walk in the mountain after I say something that disagrees with them on a panel, for example. That, you know, it's very important for them to be able to quote unquote pass so that they aren't harassed by other people in society, right? Like that's an equally plausible argument or an equally valid
Yeah,
argument.
but if you're saying that this person cannot survive without this surgery, right? If they don't get this treatment, they don't get this surgery, then at that point they must relinquish their control of any weapon because we can't risk them hurting themselves.
I don't know what the hell you're talking about. Like, I'm sorry, just to follow your own logic, would you agree with the same thing that anybody who receives any surgery should also have that happen?
Well, what I'm saying is specifically is that this treatment inside the framework of the reason why they need it is to save their life. Right?
Yeah,
That's why they
just
have
like many
to have
surgeries,
this
yeah.
surgery.
Yeah, like, and literally any mental health issue. Also, oh, hold on. So
But-
do you think that anyone who poses any kind of threat to themselves should have like any kind of weapon or any kind of like thing that could be used to take away their own life? Take it away?
Absolutely. If look, I remember we had a guy that he was under when we were underway, and he said that he was going to hurt himself. We took that threat very seriously. We removed any type of weaponry that could be around him. We confined him to quarters and made sure that he could not hurt himself, and we didn't give him the ability to. I think that when people decide that they're going to say those things where they are willing to commit self-harm, right, that we have to take that serious. So if under the same logic that these people need to have this surgery because it's going to save their life, then at that point I would want to remove their ability to be able to hurt themselves.
I
Well,
don't
what about- why do you
understand
draw
how
the
you're
line
logic
arbitrarily
works.
at
their
guns?
ability to purchase a firearm is the least that I can do. At least
about-
it's something.
There's like
All
two
right, well, what about
problems here,
literally
real
anything?
quick.
You can kill yourself with literally anything.
Yeah.
All right.
This is really,
Yeah,
really
so
not. This doesn't make any sense.
Why are you picking guns arbitrarily? Like anyone can kill themselves with anything.
Yeah.
I could go and drink like a thing of like bleach right now and fucking off myself.
Look at Jeffrey
right?
Epstein, for example. He was able to off himself in an extremely weird position that was extremely suspicious.
I mean, I don't
think
know
he
why anybody
ironically
on the
picked
I don't know why
guns
anybody
because-
on the left would be like
Like,
flipping out about
honestly,
there being one
Exactly.
more
It's
restriction.
because
Take
it would
away-
probably be, I think it was his assumption that you would probably be anti-gun to begin with. I'm assuming. I have no idea.
I am
I'm
not
not-
anti-gun, by the way, just so you know.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I'm
I-
actually not anti-gun.
like I
Yeah.
said, I was might have been his
Yeah.
assumption. I have no idea.
No, I'm totally for it. Now, I think that there should be limitations on like open carrying in public, just because there's been evidence to show that increases harm. But like, yeah, if you want to have a gun,
What
go.
the damn
fucking go for it.
shame.
I know, but
You almost
unfortunately,
have
like
me.
that's what the evidence
You
shows.
almost
If you want to
have
have a gun and you want to go hunt or whatever, I come from a family of hunters, right? I have venison frozen in my freezer right now that I'm going to use to make jerky probably after this, right? If you want to have a gun, fucking go for it.
Oh, I actually am gonna have to cut this off into ending statements. So everybody, don't worry. If you want to say something, you're gonna get a period of time, uninterrupted, 1 minute. We are looking into replacements at the moment for Bastiat. We're doing our best to filter through them, and see if we can get another replacement, to see if we can keep the show going balanced. But at the moment, we're going to end with ending statements. This time, in the top left-hand corner, is going to be Demon Mama, then last username, then CTV, then RGR, then ending it with Madman. Okay, so Demon Mama, you take it away.
Yeah. So yeah, I don't know. I got a little bit lost by some of the arguments here. At the end of the day, yes, we should use the power of government. The reason why government exists is to ensure that we have a functional and equal society. And we should be willing to say, yeah, you know what? Healthcare should cover even niche cases like trans people, which is a very real need, very well established by science. This is not controversial. I really don't understand a lot of the other things that were made. Some of them didn't even make sense on like a logical basis. So I can't really speak to those. But by and large, I think that arguments that try to imply that trans people are somehow like faking it, making it up, or, you know, just need to have a quick hike in the woods and that'll just make them better is just patently ridiculous. Not only is it ridiculous on its face just for being a silly statement, but also it flies in the face of all data that we have available to us, which, as it turns out, is a lot. Trans people deserve the same health care that anyone else gets. And as it turns out, we haven't always gotten that in this country. The best way to ensure that is to say the state has to treat everyone equally. That way that corporations can't put profit over the health care of a minority group. And that's my stance on it.
Okay, next I'm going to throw it over to last username.
Yeah. So, I mean, this is really a great example of the kind of thing that free market healthcare is great for, and the kind of thing that's going to be a problem if the government controls all of healthcare, right? When something is publicized like that, it's one size fits all, right? Everyone gets the same flavor of gruel at the government food line. So, if you want, now it may be that we're at the point where there's so much awareness of transgender people and the treatments and such that it is popular enough that it's going to be covered by government insurance. Doesn't seem to be yet, just in a few places, but maybe it actually happens. But generally speaking, anytime anybody who has some kind of new treatment or new kind of health problem that there's not a lot of awareness yet, it's controversial, and especially if it becomes politicized, it's going to be this huge battle to get that covered by the universal, government insurance that everyone is forced to buy into. A free market creates a mechanism for that kind of change to happen in a very incremental way that is much more beneficial, that's much more helpful to those minorities, right? The minorities benefit in free markets. Choice is good for minorities. And if you're asking, well, what about poor people who can't afford it in a free market? Well, poor people are a minority too. And as per the rule, they're going to get screwed in a majoritarian system. They're going to get screwed in a system where they don't have enough political power to make any changes, right? It may be the politicians may say, oh, we care about these poor people, we want to help them, but they're not actually saying that to the poor people, right? They're saying that to the middle class and the wealthy people who actually have the political power, who have the majority of the votes. So don't expect that whatever they do is actually going to help those poor people. Very likely they'll get screwed somehow in the system. Okay, so free markets, if you're a minority, if you are on the margins, you should love free markets. I'm done.
Got it. Okay, cool. We're going to throw it now to CTV.
Man, that one just came to me. So what I will say is that I felt like we had a really good discussion about this all the way around. Whether or not, if the government is going to be involved, then that is as serious as you should take it, right? Because if you want to go through the system, I've been through that system. If you are going to say that you are going to do things, or if if they need to have this because of, then there should be all measures taken seriously and a removal of, the ability to hurt themselves. And they should pretty much come into, I don't know, man, that just really came to me, right? So, I guess for me now, it's kind of one of those, how serious is this, right?
Okay, next
I don't know. That's, how serious is this?
Next, I'm going to throw it over to RGR.
Yeah, a lot of my points, I'll defer to Demon Mama. I thought she delivered a lot of arguments well, so I'm going to be spending a lot of time just like responding things I've heard. How serious is this? It's my life. That's how serious it is. And as well as the lives of like other trans people, right? Like it's our lives, right? Like it's incredibly serious. It's as serious as anyone else's life. Choice is good for minorities. Yeah, for minorities who can afford it. Yeah, if you want to say that, like, oh yeah, well the private market will totally provide transforming healthcare, yeah, to the trans people who can otherwise afford it, because like if you have a profit margin, then you're going to naturally jack up the price to however high, wherever the point is where you'll be able to make the most amount of profit, regardless of if that cuts off like certain people who are going to be able to unafford it. That's the problem with like most privatized healthcare. in general, and that's why it's better to leave it over to public healthcare. The idea that like when you have public healthcare that there are going to be problems where, oh, you have one size fits all, that's a problem with funding. That's not a problem with the fact that it's covered by the government. That just means that you need to increase the funding on that. There are plenty of countries who do that and have demonstrably good, wonderful benefits and demonstrable health quality outcomes for their average citizen. If there are politicians who lie about poor people, then that's a problem with the politicians. You vote them out, yoink them out of there. And yeah, it does mean that you end up having to rely on trying to persuade the public opinion on whether or not this is necessary. I would take that over literally just throwing this over to corporations, which we don't have any control over. And if they decide to price transforming healthcare at such a point where people just aren't able to afford it, there's no way to be able to change that. Whereas with a democracy, like an actual functional democracy, there is a way to be able to change that by swaying public opinion. And I would prefer that over a system where we actually have no control over the private sector. That's it.
Okay, and we're gonna end this topic with Madman.
Yeah, I wish I had been here to hear more of everyone's opinions for a little bit longer, so that I could really wrap this up a little bit more tidy. But basically, I think the government forcing any insurance company to provide any insurance to provide any coverage whatsoever is wrong across the board, no matter what it is. It doesn't matter if it has to deal with transgenderism or not. And so, I mean, that basically just settles it for me. It's pretty black and white. That's it.
Okay, we're going to go into the next topic, but we're going into one about the Supreme Court. And we totally have not downgraded a lawyer here. We have upgraded. I don't care what you say in chat. And with Pisco. Law student. I have to.
Law student.
And you cannot give lawyer advice. You only do that to me behind closed doors.
That's right. That's right.
Of course. So, the next topic is going to be, well, Pisco, you can introduce yourself, and then we'll go into the next one.
Sure. What's that, CTV? I thought this was my time. You were a little liberal with the mute button before, Dylan, and now I feel like it's not equal.
Well, now it's Pisco. It's different.
Gotcha. Yeah, so I'm Pisco. I'm a third-year law student. I stream sometimes on Twitch. And thank you for bringing me on.
I gotta get better at pronunciation, and just generally. Okay, so the next topic is: should the Democrats pack the Supreme Court if the Republicans nominate Amy Coney Barrett? I'm actually going to throw this first over to Last Username because I know I actually like to a lot of times talk to Last Username a lot about how to morally frame these questions, and I know he thought of a different way to frame it. So I think him starting the conversation and the flow would be a good idea.
Okay, sure. So my different way to frame it was just to ask, instead of should Democrats do this? Well, are we answering that as a Democrat or as someone who's not a Democrat and doesn't want them to? So rather than that, I suggested perhaps we should just ask what will happen if Democrats pack the Supreme Court? Because I think at the end of the day, that's what really matters, right? We're talking about a system which is meant to accomplish certain ends, certain goals. So let's just look at what are the consequences of if they actually do that, and what effect it will have ultimately on accomplishing those ends. Will it help? Will it hurt? My prediction would be no. I think it would be a massive, huge violation of existing norms. That is really uncalled for in response to anything that's happened so far. There's nothing that really justifies that. And it would just set off an escalation of violations on both sides that would result in nothing good happening. It's hard to predict because it quickly escalates out of control, but it could very well result in the destruction of the Supreme Court. And I wouldn't like to see that. Though I'm an anarchist, I actually kind of like the Supreme Court in the US and the mechanism. It's kind of not part of the government that sort of kind of works sometimes. So I wouldn't like to see it get destroyed. And I don't think there's any reason to do that.
Wonderful. Next, I'm going to throw it over to Demon Mama.
Yeah. I mean, in this current climate, yeah, the Democrats should do that. Of course, Donald Trump has done that. He's aiming to do that. He has no. He's not exactly particularly sneaky about that. He says it pretty openly. So does the GOP. The GOP has made it very clear that they don't give a shit about precedent at all. Which hey, that's fair. That's politicking for you. I am not a Democrat, though I think voting Democrat in this election is significantly better than voting Republican, obviously. But if the Democrats were to do this, we would end up with almost assuredly a more just society by at least a margin. I don't know by how much. I think there's a lot of problems that the Democrats are unprepared to address. But in our current standpoint, in the current status quo, we have a really big problem with Republicans putting extremist judges into places, including Amy Coney Barrett. If we want to have any semblance of fairness in our society and not regress towards like some sort of like monarchic society, which seems to be what a lot of Republicans are angling at these days. I think the Democrats need to be able to play hardball with the courts and use the political power that is theirs, that is given to them by the Constitution. That's the only way that you attain power when you're going against somebody who doesn't give a shit about norms. So yeah, for sure.
Okay, next I'm going to throw it over to CTV.
I think that if the Democrats were to pack the courts or try to pack the courts simply for political motivations, and that's all I can see that it could be, it shits on tradition for sure, because how long have we had 9 justices, right? So a political reason doesn't certainly seem like a reason to me, considering that the justices should be blind to both parties, right? And that the only thing that should matter is that they're, the merit of the way that they have judged cases, and how they pay attention specifically to the Constitution more so than any political affiliation. I can't see why I would be convinced to increase the number of justices. This is simply a process that all of us, have been participating in for the last, at least 37 years of my life, right? And last 244 years for everybody else that's been voting in this idea called America. This is just the way that it is, and we need to fill that seat on the Supreme Court, and this is just the process. So I feel like that this particular person fits the bill well, and that if there needs to be any number of justices added to it, I don't feel like we have the reason other than to play political games to do this. It's not like there's some particular reason why the court should be expanded.
Okay, next I'm going to throw it over to Madman.
So of course, I do not believe that the Supreme Court should be packed, obviously. But mostly it's just because it would just set a really dangerous trend if it was another 4 years of Donald Trump in office, and possibly a Congress with Republican leanings. Like, would you want them to go ahead and continue to like add justices that were maybe originalists and not living document types? And like, would you be okay with them just adding justices? And I mean, it just seems like you're only okay with people changing the rules of our society if it benefits your side or if it hurts the side you're against. So yeah, I just think that would be really dangerous, and you don't want to do that. I wouldn't want to do that.
Okay, next I'm going to go to Pisco.
Sure. There are some things that I would agree with on the other side.
Got it right.
Of the house. Yeah, you got it right. Yeah.
Wonderful.
Perfect. Well, you can call me whatever you want, Dylan. One is this inherently partisan? No one denies that it is. And that, of course, we would be against Trump if he was in control of the House, passing a law to expand the court as it stands now. So I don't deny that it's partisan, but I find it extremely ironic and problematic that now all of a sudden we're caring about norms and the continuity of institutions and the spoilage of our courts and what are we going to do. I didn't hear this crying on principle or on norms when the Republicans were breaking their own precedent, asinine as it was, not to nominate someone during an election year. I didn't hear the breakage of norms when the sitting Republican Senate wouldn't even give hearings to a Supreme Court justice of Obama, let alone lower federal court judges, which are extremely important. There wasn't a concern then about breakage of norm. What was told to me in several conversations before and after Justice Ginsburg's death was, this is a matter of pure power politics. That was told to me. It's their constitutional authority as senators to install or advise and consent the president's nomination, and they have the right to do it and the power to do so. Therefore, they should be able to exercise that power no matter what. You can't have it that way and claim power politics on one side of the House and then cry about norms after. I see the addition of a modest number of justices as a necessary correction to years of Republican breakage of norms and a sort of coming back to what I think is a more balanced court than three originalists plus whatever you want to call Alito. So the only concern I would have is how this would look in an electoral system and how it looks for the Democrats. So if it's bad for the Democrats, I probably wouldn't be in favor of it. I'm not denying that it's partisan. I'm just denying that you have any ground to stand on your accusations of hypocrisy. And I don't think this parade of horribles is going to come that many of these people claim, that all of a sudden we're going to see an escalating nuclear war of 1,000 Supreme Court justices. We don't see this kind of thing if we expand the lower federal benches. And I think that you could add a modest number of judges, maybe justices over a period of time. And I don't think we'd see the parade of horribles that the other side is claiming.
Okay, and we're going to go finally to RGR.
Hey, what's happening? Yeah, I signed off on a lot of Pisco's arguments. Also, and here's the reason why. Because in principle, I agree that court packing is bad. Last username, yeah, I agree with the principle that like if we allow court packing to continue, kind of like this sashaying like back and forth, eventually it will result in a bad outcome. But the problem is that like to say that we shouldn't pack assumes that the system is functioning as it should, which it just doesn't, right? Like basically the only limitations on whether or not people like the executive is able, like the Constitution was written just kind of expecting that the executive would in good faith not appoint partisan people to the Supreme Court. Mind you, that's what I want. I want the Supreme Court to be an objective neutral body, but it just isn't. And I mean, like we can all pretend that it is a neutral body, but if we all just pretend to do that, then the people who want to act in bad faith and take advantage of that so that they can appoint people who are partisan and support their policies are going to take advantage of it, which is exactly what Republicans have done. Because mind you, Amy Coney Barrett, I mean, like, fuck, are we going to talk about the person who clerked for Scalia and has the same textualist and originalist views that he does, was a member of Faculty for Life and an anti-abortion group, criticized Chief Justice Roberts for preserving the Affordable Care Act, and who also said that being called the N-word by her supervisor doesn't create a hostile or abusive working environment? This is clearly partisan, all right? And also just, like, pretty blatantly, and then also the amazing quality that she didn't even remember when asked about, like, do you remember the 5 essential civil rights or liberties that are protected by the First Amendment, that she happened to forget, most importantly, the right to protest. Very interesting how she selectively forgot to mention like that particular one at this point in history, right? So like to say that, so mind you, while I do agree in principle that we shouldn't have packing the courts, and while I agree in principle that we shouldn't have partisan appointing, like in the absence of an alternative, and I do want an alternative, then we need to make sure that we're not just allowing Republicans to basically trample over us, or I guess I don't know like how I assume you're a Republican, to trample over the other side when the other side is acting in good faith and clearly Republicans are not. That's my statement.
Okay, everybody has had a 1 minute, 1 minute, has had an opening statement. We're now going to slide into general conversation while I try to now fix my camera.
So
Yeah.
I agree with, what are the merits of having any number of justices? I don't understand why. Does anyone on the other side think that it was a horrible breakage of norms when the bench was increased before in our history?
I don't know. This was a while ago. I don't know the circumstances that happened under. I mean, the reason to have 9 justices is because there's 9 justices, and at this point, it seems like any change in the number would be considered a highly partisan move. Like there's obviously no consent. Like if everyone wanted to increase the number and they agreed on a way to do that, then sure, that's fine. But that's not what we're talking about here. Right? We're talking about one party increasing it to retaliate against something that the other party.
Why does this represent such a drastic step for you, as opposed to the kind of dereliction of duty, may I say, of the Republican Congress in years prior? You see this as a sort of one-way ratchet.
What is the dereliction of duty specifically?
Not giving hearings to judges that were nominated, not just Garland, scores of, so just so you know, a great deal of substantive federal law is decided upon by circuit judges and district court judges. A great deal of law. And these were not, why do you think Trump had record-setting numbers of federal judges appointed? Partly because, if not entirely because, Mitch McConnell refused to give hearings for these judges. I think unprecedented in our history. Why didn't you have a problem with that?
These were Barack Obama appointees, and they refused to.
Correct.
So
presumably you would say because it's in their power to do so, and they have the advice and consent, and it's pure power politics. And if it's in their discretionary, total plenary authority to do so,
ultimately
they have the right to do so.
If they had control of the Senate, they had the authority to.
Okay, we have the control of the Senate. We have
anyway.
Okay, so if Democrats take control of the Senate, we have both houses, and we have the presidency. We have the power to pass a law increasing the number of justices. There you go. It's the same power politics.
No.
You just gave.
Hold on. Let me talk. They didn't give a hearing, but if they had a hearing, they could have just said, "Okay, we heard you, and we still don't like them, and they vote against them." Would that have been a violation of precedent, according to you? It
would force them to say in public what we all know. So it would be less bad if they had given them hearings and said, "We're not signing on to you for political reasons." Forcing someone to go on the record and to be before a tribunal, that itself is a signaling device to voters. And the not having that out there is a huge breakage of norms, because now the public doesn't know if this was a valid, if the Senate was validly exercising its power of advice and consent. So yes, I think it's much worse to have.
But just to be clear, though,
it's not just pro forma.
If they had given hearings to all these candidates and rejected them all and explained and said why, that would not have been.
That would be better, right?
Because they would have to have good reasons then, or else they would be voted out of their office.
He got to avoid. Imagine the folly of having a hearing where they're not able to at all implicate or undermine any of these highly respected judges. Listen, I'm not going to sit here and say there was the worst hearings of all time from Judge Barrett, but imagine him having to do that for every single federal judge. I think that would show the voters this is a pure exercise of partisan politics, and they would have paid the consequences. But they avoided that, and they avoided the democracy and the payback that would have come if they had held those hearings.
Like, I'm not going to say that what they did was perfectly fine, and I'm certainly not going to stand.
You don't care at all.
The excuse that they. What do you mean? No. Okay, I don't like the excuse that they made. I think it was stupid to say, "Oh, let's wait till after the election." Like, that's bullshit.
No. I'm talking about the federal judges. So forget about Scalia's seat. Forget about for a second. Think about all the when did the Senate Republicans take control of the Senate? 2014? I forget. Some part in Obama's second term, right? From that point on, they didn't approve federal judges for the most part. What do we say to that?
Did they just leave all these seats empty for years?
Why do you think the Republicans had so
Trump.
many? Yeah.
Okay.
Also, I just want to point out that, just real quick, just to build on this, I think we would be totally wrong to not point out the fact that this type of, as Pisco calls it, the raw power politics or pure power politics is part and parcel of the Republicans' current strategy. What is it that the Mitch McConnell's desk is the graveyard of bills? That he's done the exact same thing, abusing the system that we have in place to stop all bills that come from his opponents that would have any electoral benefit to them, regardless of how it impacts the American people. And one of the best examples of this has been the constant shooting down of aid in the middle of a coronavirus, of the coronavirus pandemic. And so it's not just here. This is a precedent. This is a pattern that we can see with the Republican Party, of the Republican Party being willing to go in the worst faith possible for their own personal gain and put the American people and American democracy on hold in multiple ways, including the Supreme Court, including federal justice seats, including bills. We have the Republicans choking the entire government.
But you're just assuming that they're rejecting those bills for partisan reasons. Like maybe they just don't like those.
I mean,
bills.
come
Maybe
on,
they just
surely
don't
you
like
can't be that dopey
you're-
about
you're-
politics, my
you're
friend. When
being
you have a graveyard, that's
you're being
absurd.
so deferential and so charitable to Republicans. You're saying, like, I can divine a reason that could be legitimate, but on the part of the Democrats and their proposed,
honestly, I don't know.
You don't give that
follow
charity.
American
Oh,
politics
also,
that
just so
closely,
you
but
know-
you're gonna have to convince, like, just saying like the Republicans rejected the bill. Well, convince me that they did that for.
Don't worry,
bad
I
reasons,
can.
right?
Remember, in fact, it was just on Fox News the other night. I believe it was Fox News. Mitch McConnell said, referring specifically to Obama being unable to get anything done in his last term.
It's because of me.
It was because of me. That was Mitch McConnell. Mitch McConnell, the current leader of the Republican-led Senate. So yeah, he literally admits to it. They're fucking arrogant as shit. Yeah, they openly admit to this. And here's the thing that is wild to me being in politics. This is something I talk about all the time. And it's funny because there's all these conspiracies about the Democrats doing this and the parade of horribles and all these little catchphrases and buzz phrases. But when you actually look into the matter of public record, it's unbelievably clear that it is the Republican Party and the current power brokers in the Republican Party who have literally taken the Constitution and just shat on it. Used it like fucking toilet paper as far as how they're concerned. They don't give a shit about the rights of anyone. They just want to win. And the worst part is, it's not even for their constituents. It's for them.
Here's a question for people on the panel. I'm curious. If let's say Biden wins the presidency, but loses the Senate, and there's a vacancy on the Supreme Court, does anybody think that the Senate, even in the first year of the Biden presidency, would fill that seat? Does anyone think that? Speak up if you think that they would do that.
I would be honest. No, not with
Okay.
Mitch McConnell.
So then I don't want to
I've
hear
written angry
about
letters to him before.
So then
I've
essentially
written angry letters to him before.
what
Why
we're
wouldn't they?
saying
I'm
is,
not a
Because then they're
fan.
just risking losing the Senate in 2 years and not getting any say in it.
what do you think? Do you trust them?
I
I mean,
mean,
think about how, like,
If I was in their
pained-
position, I would. I would negotiate to get the candidate that I would, the mutually
last year's
agree on.
name, you have more
Otherwise-
faith than I do.
Listen,
Well, it's just strategy, right? Like if they could lose the Senate, if they still have the Senate, they could lose it in a couple of years, and then they wouldn't get any say. So it seems smarter. Well, what else are they going to do? Wait 4 years?
How long do you
and-
think they held up Merrick Garland's seat? That's the same calculus was being at play there. You think just because it's closer to the election, or it's 2 years as opposed to 1 year, that calculus is different?
And this is all inside the rules, right?
Yeah, but after 2 years, they're not going to get any more power after 2 years. They're not going to get the presidency after 2 years, right?
I understand that, but why would the calculus be different if you're saying they might face electoral consequences?
I guess
They-
in 2016,
they did
were
it in
hoping that they would
2016.
win the election.
They didn't face consequences, and you think now they're going to be more, after having not faced the consequences the first go around, they're going to be more careful the second go around and more deferential to President Biden's Supreme Court pick. Is that what you're suggesting?
Even
It's
if they
also
don't
funny,
face
too,
consequences,
because
it doesn't
it's-
seem like a good strategy to
Well,
me.
it's almost like they aren't able to face consequences specifically because they do everything in the shadows. They take advantage of every possible loophole, sometimes probably straight up violating the rules, but it's really hard when there's so many laws on the books. But they do everything they can to keep it out of the public eye. Because as it turns out, when you have the public eye on really bad and obvious corruption, that tends to hurt your electoral chances, which no doubt, that is exactly what the Republican Party engages in. Widespread, disgusting corruption that is actively killing this country. So yeah, I have nothing but disdain for the way that they go for it, and I would love it if the Democrats would finally stop playing nice and pack the shit out of that court, so that for once so we don't have to look forward to 40 years of absolutely regressive fantasyland so-called originalism, which is hilarious. The idea that there could even be something called originalism when by definition
Hey,
we
Demon
have
Mama, did you
Excuse me?
forget your quotes? Originalism.
I had one, yeah. I had this one. Yeah. Sorry, I have to
Sorry.
press the button with the other hand. Yeah. It's
I mean-
I literally did this. I know it's
That's
like
okay.
I know it's hard to say, but it's
no,
okay.
it's all right.
I mean, do you think
Yeah.
it's bad that like
With the
what-
the
what
idea
would-
of originalism
what would a
is
Supreme
absurd.
Court look like that isn't partisan and politicized?
No, no.
other
Wait,
than
you can't
something like-
have a truly nonpartisan court. It's absurd. The idea that nobody
I mean,
has any
you can
political idea.
try.
No, well,
It is.
No,
it-
you
I-
can
I-
try.
I
yes,
will
you can
say, while
try.
we're-
Do you
Like,
think?
if
Do you
camping
think the
on
Republicans
partisan,
have
then you
tried it
shouldn't
all
have them.
when they've
but
put
that's
on?
been my only complaint about Amy Coney Barrett, because I really do admire a lot about her, but that has been my only complaint about her.
What's that?
And one of the Democratic senators, I can't remember his name, Durham, I believe is the person that brought it up, was that
Dick
we've
Durham,
gotten
yep.
to the point in this country. He was the one that brought up the fact that we've gotten to the point in this country, and I do not blame Republicans or Democrats alone on this matter. But we've gotten to the point in this country that we have justices that can sit in front of the Senate and they can't even give their own opinions about things.
Well, that's
They-
understandable,
she-
right?
she-
I have a little more respect for
I
the court.
disagree.
You can't ask them to opine on
like-
hypothetical cases. They don't have briefings from
Not-
the court below. I don't blame Amy Coney Barrett for not asking, like answering questions. How would you rule if the president tried to postpone an election? How could she
but not
possibly
about
answer?
that. But no, but not about that. But
Okay.
about just maybe about her own personal. She should be able to have a personal identity, though, but you can't in today's world. And she very smartly did not answer particular questions in a certain way because she would have been ravaged in the media. But in our political climate, you can't have an identity anymore. So it was kind of sad, you know.
She wants to de-emphasize it because she has to rule. She has to like govern over cases, and even the appearance of bias is extremely bad. So you see oftentimes judges and justices shying away
it's
from.
also really phony, though.
I
As
don't
Demon
think-
Mom was pointing out, she is obviously going to have a personal perspective, a skew of some.
She should
is-
hide it. She shouldn't
Well,
be.
no. I think I think there's a split down the middle that we can do here, which is like I don't buy into the idea that you can't have any sort of opinions
I'll be
in
right
public or
back.
anything. I don't buy that at all. I think people do, and I think in fact Amy Coney Barrett's are pretty clear. But this is a Supreme Court seat. We don't hold Supreme Court candidates to the same standards that we would just your everyday person on the street. We hold them to a higher standard. But like again, there's another factor that complicates this, which is that we have a political process that leads to that justice being put forward in the first place. And let's be real, we all know, every single person, any honest person on this panel knows that there are better options than Amy Coney Barrett. Justices who are not nearly as biased, who have not ruled as clearly in one-to-one support with the Republican Party's platform, that could have been chosen, but they weren't. And the reason why is because there's an attempt to pack the court. Yeah. So
But that's not packing the court. I mean,
okay. Come on. Don't you can't be honest. You can't honestly be doing this. We know Donald Trump. Donald Trump literally admits he's going to do it. He says this at his rallies. Yeah, we're going to put another Republican on there. We're going to, I'm not going to talk about Roe v. Wade. Maybe it'll be gone. Who knows? We'll see. We know.
I mean, Donald Trump says a lot of crazy things, especially when he's talking.
I agree.
Okay,
I agree.
well,
He does say a lot of
I
crazy
don't buy
things.
that.
Riley, we can't hear you. Have you been talking? Riley.
Riley?
Thank
Riley?
Oh
you for
shit!
the sub.
Oh damn!
Right.
Yeah,
Oh,
sorry.
yeah, you've
I'm
been
sorry.
muted.
Sorry. Yeah.
Have you been talking to us?
Not that much actually.
Okay,
So I
my
don't know.
bad.
You probably didn't miss anything. Okay.
My
Well, I
bad.
just need to make sure. Is this the argument that we can't take anything that Trump says seriously because like he says quote unquote a lot of crazy shit? Like, is that actually the argument that you're making
Well,
right
the
now?
argument is that just because Trump is saying I'm going to put a shill on the Supreme Court doesn't mean you can actually assume that this.
He's
person is a
literally
shill.
the president of the United States telling people
Yeah.
at a political rally why they should vote for him. How can
Yeah,
how can you not
exactly.
take that seriously? Are you serious that we
but
can't take that seriously? That is somehow excusable from being
Because-
taken seriously?
He's
Because
also
he
the
says-
guy. Wait, he's also the guy who who picks Amy Coney Barrett. What do you mean? Of course we can take him seriously
I'm
when
sorry,
he
this
says
is-
why.
Yeah, I'm sorry. This is also the guy who thinks that disavowing and not disavowing white supremacy are the same thing. I'm sorry. And so I completely understand your position. I completely, I can see that there's not much happening in your head. I'm sorry. I'm sorry. I shouldn't have been surprised.
I hope we'd focus on the federal judiciary, but the last name. Do you have a response to? I mean, Trump has it's court packing by another name. The same kind of strategy.
What do you mean? How is it court packing?
Mitch
I don't understand.
so Mitch
I thought
McConnell
court packing
and
is when you add more people to the court to
that. Okay, so court. That's one method of court packing. Another
the actual
interpretation.
definition. The new definition that
well,
people came
hang
up
on.
with. To,
Another
confusing.
interpretation of court packing.
Slow down,
is,
Pisco. I know you're getting excited over there.
Okay. Do you have something substantial to say, or do you want you just?
You
No,
heard what I said.
no, he's just
That
asking
was
you.
pretty
We just got to go
substantial.
to the mountains, Pisco.
Okay.
That's all. You got to go to the mountains.
Okay, so CTV. Another, I think, flavor of court packing would be something like never giving dozens and dozens and dozens of federal judges even hearings and waiting until the presidency Republican to just jam them all in. That is court packing by another name. And it's not done by.
I would not call that court packing.
Okay, so you have an appreciation.
I think you're just trying to confuse people by reusing.
No. You have an attachment. You have an attachment
Hey,
to
Pisco.
You have an
Pisco,
attachment to
hold on, look,
formalism.
Pisco.
Wait.
Pisco.
Can I respond?
Hold on. No, you listen. You asked the man a question. You have to let him answer. That's how respect works, son.
No, he just said that I'm confusing and misdirecting.
You didn't let him answer because you started getting,
I heard his
excited.
response. His response was this. He really does care about the formalism.
Dissension is really unwarranted here. Holy shit.
He really does care about the formalism of passing a congressional statute with bicameral presentment and passage by the president. That's really important to him, to his definition of court packing. But really, all we're talking about here is shifting the balance. It's a zero-sum game, right? It doesn't matter if there's 100 justices or 10 justices. The only thing that matters
I don't accept that
is the division.
A party trying to get their favorite judges on the court is court packing. That's just what
it's
we
a
can
different
assume that
method.
all parties do all the time.
Wait, so the variable that we care about is the division, right? The quote unquote part. If you want to think about it in these terms, the partisan division of courts. That's the variable we care about. Whether or not
it's not the variable we care about.
So you care about the number of seats? You don't think it's the partisan?
Yeah.
Wait, so the whole issue for you is not whether or not partisan people are
we're talking about the definition of this term, right? The definition of court packing.
Why is court packing bad?
The court packing is bad. We're talking about court packing as in adding more people to the Supreme Court.
But why is that bad?
Just to add.
Is adding people bad, like by itself? Right? Is 9 really that much better than 11?
Because once you violate that norm, you've essentially started a very
there's a reason why it's bad, right? There's a reason why it's bad. Why is it bad? It's bad because of partisan reasons, right? That's what we're worried about.
Yeah.
Correct?
It's bad because it starts a conflict, and it's not that.
What kind of conflict?
You're literally kind of avoiding
because
like
one
the
side
reason
packs
why
the court, the other side can pack court.
Okay, so it's partisan, correct? So what we're caring about is division of power.
It's partisan as fuck. That's why we don't want
it. So that's why we're worried about it. So it's not really the number of justices that we're worried about. It's really the division of partisan affiliations of the justices, correct or no?
Sure, yeah.
Okay, so then
really
it's this. So that's the animating evil behind the court packing evilness. Then that's the same animating evil behind the kind of nefarious non-hearings that the Republicans were doing for years. Yes or no?
Perhaps, but it's not court packing. So it doesn't change the definition.
It's a simple yes or no.
No, it doesn't.
Wait, what do you mean no?
Okay,
it's literally like McConnell admitting to not letting justices being able to be seen during during the Obama presidency.
Hold on a
That's
second.
literally preventing court packing. That is specifically disallowing Democrats from
your terms. Fine, it's not court packing.
Let me explain it to you, okay? Let me explain it to you. Because I've been quiet.
You explained it to us. Yeah, someone who isn't in law school, literally explaining to two law students what this is. Yeah, okay, totally.
Let me explain it to you, right? So
Doesn't
here's
mean he can't have an opinion.
Court packing
I mean, when
you
he's
take
talking
a
about
walk in the woods
explaining
with some
something.
justices.
Yeah, for real.
Yeah,
no, when he wants to explain something, then I want to hear the credentials.
Yeah, if he wants to explain something, he'll just, start over talking people and being disrespectful, and he'll just do those kinds of things because that's what y'all do, right? That's what he's expected to do.
I want to hear your opinion.
I'm going to interrupt you. Yeah, totally.
Fuck up and listen.
Okay. So everybody,
damn, we all need to go for a walk in the.
Riley.
I'm telling you.
Sorry.
Riley, when I start talking, everybody shuts down. I want it to be going forward. I'm going to be less kind about that. Going forward, when I start talking, everybody needs to shut down. Okay? CTV, please state what you were going to say.
So here's the point, right? We've had 9 justices for a long time. The politicians care about what the affiliations are that they have with these people. We, the people, should not care about that. The things that we should care about is how the Constitution is being understood, right? So it's not political, right? It's literally about somebody qualified to do the job. Now, as soon as you decide to break precedent and start adding more and then taking them away, right? That's what we're talking about. Whenever you start adding the number of justices, that's called packing the court, right? Now, what Mitch McConnell did, right, is there was no rule broken, right? There wasn't anything shady, right? Maybe it could have been shady, but the reality is, though, is that it was allowed, right? So the how they were able to
This is allowed.
listen, how they were able to hold open all of those seats, right? And then waited for a Republican to get in office, so then those seats could be filled. That's just good chess. So checkmate.
This
Liv.
is just good chess.
This is just good chess. Yeah, exactly. Checkmate.
Checkmate.
Okay.
Okay,
it.
so then you're good with it.
Cool. Yeah, cool,
Yeah.
chill. Glad you're on board with us, CTV. I didn't know that you were switching sides so quickly, but I'm
No,
glad that you
not
came over to us.
sides. I'm only pointing out to you that's the game.
Yeah, that's the
Right?
game.
That's
So
the
court
game.
packing is the game. Yeah,
The
exactly.
court packing is the
100%.
game. It's also
Yeah,
legal.
it's allowed. It's literally
There's
allowed.
no reason to pack the courts because now you.
All right, now you're
didn't
arguing
have-
against your
hold
initial
on.
point.
The reason
It's all
why is
allowed.
because you didn't have the voices necessary in the House and the Senate to be able to get what.
And now you don't have the voices to stop our court packing.
Yeah, now we can do it. Yeah, checkmate. Checkmate.
Right, so what do you expect to happen after you do that?
packing,
After-
though?
No,
I don't know.
I think it's. Oh yeah, no, I
Well,
don't.
if you
I
don't
love
know,
this
why are you so
situation.
sure that it's a good idea?
Wait, hold
Oh,
on.
I think it's the best idea that we have. That's
I just
the
want to
thing.
hear your whining
Why do you think
about
it's a
breaking
good
precedent.
idea at
Listen,
all?
I just don't want to hear
It's not a
whining
good
about
idea.
precedent
No,
and
no, no.
institutions.
Well,
Okay, that's what I
you
don't want to
called
hear.
it-
It's
Well, who
not a
you
good
called
No,
it
I want to hear
hard
you
court
explain why you
packing.
think it's a good idea to do this.
Why do I think it's a
No,
partisan
we're-
matter or as an institutional matter? What do you think? What do you? How are you tailoring your question?
Whatever you're saying you don't
Okay.
know what will happen if you do this. Yet
So
you think
I
it's
think a
good idea.
calculation needs to
Very
be
strange.
made. Okay, so how much value do I put on having good precedent? I don't know. It's really important for me to have. I think for the country that we have a capacious view of the Interstate Commerce Clause. I think it's really important for our country that we maintain stare decisis and we maintain court decisions such as Casey versus Planned Parenthood and Roe v. Wade. I think it's really good. I don't know how much value I'd put on that. Probably a lot. And in which case, you do the cost benefit analysis. Maybe don't add too much because maybe I don't know. There's some equilibrium, some number that maximizes value for me. And I'm sure that's, two or
What are you measuring the cost of though? Like if you don't even know what's going to
the
happen.
potential
as a result
threat
of this.
of the other ratchet, right? That's the threat, which I
Yeah.
acknowledge exists. But that threat exists now. That threat exists. It still exists. It's been existing.
Don't you think that threat is a bigger threat once you've taken done the initial court
they
packing?
already hold the
I've already
courts?
done that. Yeah, that's
Yeah.
literally already happened.
No,
You're
they
talking
haven't.
about. Yes, they do.
What do you mean
Oh
they
my
don't?
god,
They-
are you fucking
There's
serious?
still 9 people on the court.
No.
We're talking about the entirety of the court
federal
system.
judiciary. So the federal judiciary is more than Supreme Court. Supreme Court sees what 80 cases a year, if that. They get thousands of cert petitions every year, and the courts of appeals make tons of law and appellate law. The district courts make tons of trial court and substantive rulings on the merits. And so this myopic view of the federal courts as the Supreme Court is blasphemous. The Supreme Court will only often see cases if there's a circuit split. So please, there are issues of constitutional law that we've known about for a century that haven't been resolved by the Supreme Court. So keep that in mind. It's the federal judiciary as a whole that we're worried about.
And you think that what's been done already has already escalated this conflict to the point where
Absolutely. Are you
Oh, yeah,
serious?
totally. 100%.
Like,
1,000%.
Again, I'll ask you if that's
1,000%.
true. What do you think? So I guess in that case, you want to be looking at how do you resolve this conflict? Because that's not what the Republicans are
It's
going to
not by being the bigger person. It's not by being the bigger person. And first of all,
Well, what is it then? What do you?
I can tell you why. I can tell how you do it. The way that we do this is by first, we pack the shit out of the courts so that we have an actual equal system where that we undo the damage that was done by the Republicans. And then anybody who opposes this kind of shit happening again should oppose the Republican Party. The Republican Party should not be electorally viable in this country at all. As a sitting president, Donald Trump is like, this is just talking about Donald Trump. No. This is important because I think we might actually be getting to that juncture. But the Republicans should not be made politically viable in this country. We should show them for what they've done.
That's
No, they shouldn't be. The Republicans should no longer be a party.
But they are, and they will be. They'll
And
just
yes,
adapt
and
to
guess what?
whatever
And then we should fight them
makes
using
politically
any
viable.
political outcome that we
Okay,
possibly
but it's
can.
not going to
Because
happen.
as
So
it
you're
stands
not
right now,
talking about what you want to happen.
wait,
You're not
wait,
talking about what
wait.
is the actual consequences
You
of the thing
actually-
that you're
you
advocating.
actually
You don't know what the consequence. Wait, you don't know what the consequences will be. You don't know. I mean,
I
I'm
can
sure
tell
you've
you what
seen-
the
I
consequences
don't.
are.
But
I
I
can
don't
tell
think
you what
they're
the
going to be good.
consequences
And
have been for myself.
that uncertainty
because-
is enough for me to say.
I
it's
think they're
fine.
going to be
Am I gonna be able
good.
to
You
finish?
think they're not going to be good? I think they're
Okay.
going to be good.
Okay, what are
So
the
generally, if you don't know what the consequences of something are going to be, you don't do it.
Really?
Right.
Republicans are
Yeah.
already doing it,
Yeah.
like literally doing it right now.
Let's make a radical change to the structure of the government. We
How
don't know what the
radical is
consequences
it?
will be,
Yeah,
but
yeah.
they might
You know
be
what?
good.
I don't know
So
what's
let's do
radical
it.
before.
Wait. Listen,
Not
I've been trying to
great.
get in here for a while. You
Okay.
know what is a radical change to the government? Stepping in and making it impossible for us to refill the empty seats that previously existed. That's a radical change to the way that our country works. So radical, it's even more than anything we're even talking about at this very moment. That's an unbelievably radical change.
It's really
And-
not, though. If they had the
no,
power,
actually, it really, really is.
Holy
It really,
shit.
How is
really
it not
is.
radical?
And here's the other thing. The other thing is that I can tell you, I know what's going to happen going forward because unlike some people who like will bury their heads in the sand and say, oh, maybe they won't do this. We're going to lose Roe v. Wade, which is going to hurt a lot of women. 2, I'm probably going to lose the right to marry my wife. Because as it turns out right now, there are a lot of people on the Republican stacked court who have a vested interest. And in fact, it's the Republican Party's platform right now. Weird how that works out. That they want to uphold traditional marriage, which means I won't be able to get married to my wife. So that's the future that I'm looking at. So when I say that I want the Republican Party to become a political anathema in this country, I would love it if every American looked back in history on the Republican Party as one of the most embarrassing failures in the history of a democratic society, which they are, almost objectively.
Hey, check
So-
this
How do you know
out.
you're
Hot
not
take,
making the
Demon Mama.
Republican Party more
Hot take,
powerful
Demon
by
Mama.
attacking the court? I mean,
Well-
it would be a great political talking point for them, right?
Okay,
Yes,
CTV over.
we're going to give them more power by taking away power from them. Yes, 200, that 1,000 IQ take, amazing. 10 out
They're
of
just
10.
going to, I mean, if the Democrats do
Well,
that, the
hot-
Republicans are just going to be like,
That's
they hate the
conjecture.
Constitution, they
They're
hate the
literally
courts,
doing
they're
that
trying
right
to
now.
destroy
They
the
will
country.
invent any reason to rile up their support.
It's
They
a
literally call
zero-sum
anyone-
game.
They'll have a much better case, a much
What-
more
They will
convincing
literally
case
call-
if the Democrats
Wait,
do
they're
that.
already doing it anyway. They don't even need a case. They don't
they're
give a
doing
shit.
Yeah,
They
this is
haven't-
what
here's
we're
the
They'll
thing.
do it
we
much
do.
more.
Wait. Over the last like
They'll do it much
15
more.
years,
Holy fuck.
yeah, over the
How could
last
they do it
15 years,
more?
Democrats have played nice, and Republicans have played vicious, pure politics. Well, guess what? This is the funny thing. You keep asking us, oh, what will happen? You should be asking your right-wing comrades what the fuck is actually going to be happening to them, because this is the moment where people are starting to realize that they've been duped for 15 years. While the Democrats played nice and played by the rules, the Republicans found the worst possible ways to interpret the law to give themselves personal power. And now the pendulum is swinging back. And it's funny that you say, oh, well, what will happen? Won't it give Republicans more power? No, this is removing their power. We're trying to to get them out of a position where not only do they win by completely ignoring like the popular vote, but right now, Donald Trump and his advisors have talked about how they hope to use the Supreme Court to win the election without winning the popular vote, without winning the Electoral College.
To say nothing of Obergefell,
Yeah.
say nothing of Roe v. Wade, say nothing of the Affordable Care Act and the case pending right now.
The Republican Party, I wish, if I could
It
have
just
my
sounds
wish.
like
Wait, if I could have my
speculation
wish, I know
to be
you
like,
want to
this-
jump in with
They
your whatever
literally-
milk
when
toast
we do
defense
this
you
really
have.
nasty
You're
thing, we'll win
burying
and
your
we'll
head in
crush
the
them, and
sand.
they will never
Whatever.
retaliate because we're amazing. Like you're just
No.
you're
It's
speculating.
because
Literally-
right now. Wait, imagine this. Imagine if the Republican Party took power legally using the Constitution somehow, and then they installed a king, and then everybody said, "What the absolute fuck? We need to do something. We need to depose this king." And you go, "Depose the king?
Yeah, you
Oh,
would be.
no!"
You guys would be the total plausible deniability for this administration. You would take orders. You would be the docile forces for this oppressive state control. of Donald
Pisco,
Trump.
not to
Okay,
interrupt.
okay,
Pisco,
okay.
not to interrupt. There's a great
Who's
term
you
here.
and what do you
There's a great term that the left loves to use for this, and
Okay.
it's called bootlicking.
Okay.
And it's what you're doing right
Okay,
now.
okay.
You're suggesting that I love the Republicans. or something. I'm not.
Okay. I want to give CTV and Madman a period to speak since they haven't gotten to speak in a little bit. Okay, I'm gonna start with CTV and then Madman right after.
All right. Man. I hate it whenever it's like that. Okay, so let her go first, please.
Yeah, let
Yes.
Madman go first.
I think that unfortunately, Demon Mama has been listening to perhaps some of the loudest voices on the Republican side and not what the general population actually feels. Unfortunately, I'm not the best representation, I think, of what the general population feels, because I am like a person likes traditional marriage and all that stuff. So I'm not a good representation of that. But however, the general population is a huge umbrella of people that don't want to take people's rights away or any of that. In fact, the idea of conservative values is not to have the government involved in people's personal preferences. And as time went on, the Republican Party, I think, changed. I think when social tensions started rising, we might have seen more extremists, and that was part of like the louder voices that you heard. And like, I think everyone is guilty of that, is like only listening to the few loud voices and not actually like listening to what the majority of people actually think. But
This is not an argument. I mean, you're making appeals to some platitude about how the history of conservatism and about, an appeal to the majority.
I'm talking to. I'm
I mean,
actually.
I can
like,
respond.
Well, what's the argument?
Yeah, I can respond. You're not making an argument. You're making this kind of vague platitude that just goes to.
It wasn't. It wasn't.
Wait. Are you gonna let me respond or not? Are you gonna let me respond?
Wait.
Well,
Look,
No. I'm not. I'm trying to
I would like
defend
to-
myself, and then I want her to.
Let me
I want
hear the end of it,
I want to
Let me hear
defend
you.
myself, and then I want Demon Mama to respond. It wasn't meant to be an argument. Dylan Burns asked me to jump in, so I just wanted to put my hand out to Demon Mama that was kind of shitting on some people on my side about
You're actually insulting her.
that
You're insulting her.
didn't want her wife to get married, and I don't think that people are like that in general over here. So I just wanted to send out a little olive branch over on that side. That was all. So now I'd like her to respond if that's cool.
Yeah, I wish that I could believe you on that, but I think you're dead wrong. And I think every single metric that we can possibly draw from shows that. What you are motioning at is fantasy, and it's this sort of idea that, oh yeah, when you're sitting in front of when you're sitting in front of a gay queer woman, you'll say these sort of things. But in truth, the GOP's platform right now is for traditional marriage. They are the ones who make the calls for the party. The party itself is. Donald Trump has never shown any love to the LGBT community, except for that time when he held up that dingy flag and went, I love my gays. I sure do love them. But no, what he's done is he's banned trans people from the military. He's pushed a memo. His government pushed a memo out that literally targeted trans people. Here's how you can spot a trans person, which is horrifically dangerous for a whole number of reasons. So yeah, sorry, bullshit. I'm going to call that a complete fantasy. And I think it's not me who's been listening to the loudest voices, but perhaps it's your desire to present your party as less morally reprehensible as it is than it actually is, because it is morally reprehensible and also politically reprehensible. The Republican Party is one of the most viciously bad institutions I can even think of in the modern day. Like, barring like literal terrorist groups it's like some war-torn country, I can't think of many political parties that are more vicious and anti-democratic and anti-personal personal freedoms than the Republican Party. Are you kidding me? This is the party that backs dumping tons and tons of money into bigger police forces. You sure don't care about small government when it comes time to give it to the military or the police, when it comes time to signal about how you want to bring law and order, how you Donald Trump, the leader of the party, the representative y'all are voting for, is gonna go, oh yeah, the federal marshals, they went in, they didn't want to arrest him, they just gunned him down, they just 15 minutes and it was over. Yeah, sorry, I don't buy any of the fucking fake bullshit about how this is a nice party and there's lots of nice people. No,
they're not libertarians. At least Trump isn't.
No, they're definitely not.
Executive power maximalist.
That you're calling a Canadian anarchist a Republican bootlicker just for
I didn't
saying
call you that.
I know.
I went off the handle. I'm sorry.
And the fact that she's calling me that just for suggesting that packing the Supreme Court might be too extreme a measure that might cause more harm than good, especially if you can't explain to me what you expect the consequences.
Oh, I mean,
to be.
just
The fact
to
that you're
be clear,
calling
just
me
to
a
defend
Republican
myself just a
bootlicker for
little
that
bit.
shows me
Just
that
to
you're
defend
not
myself.
really thinking very clearly and
No,
objectively.
no.
That's
Listen,
that you're
I
coming from-
understand.
I would like to hear the end of last username's statements because he'd get 80% into his statement and then it'd be cut off. I'd like to hear the end of it.
I'm just saying that the fact that that's your response to me making a perfectly reasonable suggestion shows that you don't seem to be thinking very clearly about that, and your opinions are coming from, I don't know, like that you're just pissed off at the Republican Party, and that's what this is about for you, not about thinking about the consequences of the decision of the actions you're going to take and whether they're going to have a good effect.
Just to clarify what was said there. No, the reason that I call you a Republican bootlicker, which I do think you're a Republican bootlicker, the reason why I call you a Republican bootlicker is not just because of your opinion on this. It's because your opinions just seem to always fall in favor of the Republican Party. Anybody can call themselves whatever. I could call myself an anarcho-Martian if I wanted to. You can call yourself whatever the hell you want. I mean, fuck, the Tea Party called themselves libertarian, which is an insult. Excuse me, critically thinking veteran. I know.
What are the opinions that I have?
CVT, come on. She was in the middle of her statement.
An anarchist.
Why don't we go back and look at the
some of
bottom?
your views are.
CTV and CTV. Okay, we're shutting it down. CTV. And when that happens, I do my best to stop them and pass it over to you. 80% of the time, it's me trying to pass it over to you, and you know that.
I get it, man. And then, it's out of complete thought. Like, I have the thought, and I'm sitting there holding on to it for 10 fucking minutes.
I know. Well, and I passed it to you earlier, and then you told me to pass it to Madman, so I passed it to Madman. So now it's back.
It's all true, right? But then who's over here, and then they want to cover they want to call names, and then now we're talking about that. We're not even talking about the issue at hand. So people have a real problem when it comes to staying on topic.
Well, yeah, right? I will say that name calling usually is not the best thing for productive dialogue, but I probably will not tell people, well, everybody, no name calling, and we got to be nice. If someone's called a name, it's like, what am I gonna do? You gotta take it. We can't talk about you being called a name. We kind of have to take a divert. It does divert the conversation, but I do want people to be able to defend themselves. So I do want to get back on topic. You do have a point there, but I do want them to finish this engagement, and hopefully I can bring the conversation back around. Okay, so Demon Mama and last username. Who's the last one that was talking? I've legitimately forgot.
I would like to say something about last year, if that's okay. And then I know Riley's waiting as well.
Okay. Yeah, I decided if we're caring a lot about making sure that we're being very formal and everything, I have responses for Madman CTV and last username. I'll wait until you give me that.
Okay. It's there's also a problem of your camera keeps freezing and it's kind of hard to see if you're raising your hand or not.
Yeah.
Mine does?
Yes.
Yeah,
yes.
a little bit. Yeah.
Oh, that's not a problem. I don't know. I'm not getting that problem on my end. I don't know.
Okay. I'm going to Demon Mama, were you finishing a statement?
I was in the middle when CTV interrupted me.
Okay, Demon Mama, you can finish that.
Listen, last username, I don't think that you're not, that you don't have some anarchist principles. I just think that sometimes you grant a lot of credibility to these right-wing types who really don't stand for any of your values. And I guess listen, I mean, for example, granting a lot of credence to the court tampering when Republicans do it, being really partial to Amy Coney Barrett, which
said it wasn't severe enough to justify the kind of.
Yeah, I mean, you can come up with all kinds of ways to wiggle out of it. The point of I'm just making my statement. I'm just making my statement. I mean, listen, I just think that at the end of the day, if you really are an anarchist, and by the way, I mean, I don't know, I don't really buy the whole ANCAPs or anarchist thing, but listen, if you're really an anarchist, I think you should look very hard at the structure of the Republican Party before you do as much apologetics as you do on every stream for the Republican Party, because they do
zero apologetics for the Republican Party. The topic we're talking about, it's kind of hard to avoid talking about the Republican Party.
Elio, can I apologize for implying that you're beholden to Trump or those parties. All I want to say is this. So we've sort of discussed and established that the animating evil behind so-called court packing is partisanship. We're worried about one party putting forth all their judges and somehow tainting.
I don't know what you mean by the animated evil. I'm saying I could potentially imagine a scenario where the Supreme Court gets expanded in a way that doesn't escalate tensions between the party. If that's what
Correct. So the mere fact that you give that as a possibility says that we're not really worried about the number of seats. What we're worried about is the partisan nature of it. Correct? That's what we're really worried about. Because you acknowledge that 11 seats and 9 seats. What's the difference? So
the issue is that one party clearly doesn't want to do that. One party does.
That's the animated evil behind the court packing. In the failure to give hearings of the Republican side of norm breaking,
it was also clearly a partisan thing. That was
clearly a partisan thing,
and probably not that great. I'm not saying.
But what does it matter whether it's made by a statute, whether we call it court packing, if it's effectively doing the same thing and affecting the balance of power?
I don't think it's
that's the same thing, right? How is it not?
I really don't think it is. I think this packing the Supreme Court seems like a far more severe move.
Why does it seem more? Why does it seem more severe? You're saying it seems more severe. Why?
So you don't think it's more severe?
I think it's the same thing, right? If you're affecting the balance,
because what they did is something they could have accomplished anyway.
Even it is something you could have accomplished. It's in the rules. You could do it.
They could have had hearings for those nominees, and
you can pass a law.
And that would be completely.
I said to you that would be different, and I explained to you why that would be different.
But the difference doesn't seem to amount to something as severe.
Why not? You're saying it's not as severe.
Why? You're just kind of arguing. You're just arguing from your feelings.
It's conclusory
because
it affects the balance in the same way.
First of all, the Supreme Court is more supreme than these other courts, and you're talking about something
we have Merrick Garland. That's an example of who's never given a hearing. So it affects the Supreme Court and also the judiciary. So any distinguishing factor, I'm begging you to give it something that distinguishes it.
But again, the Senate had the authority to turn down Merrick Garland if they wanted.
Has an authority, and the Congress has an authority to pass a court packing law. It's not a distinguishing factor.
Sure, but okay.
So what is it that makes it more severe?
It's clear that there needs to be some sort of norm that says how many people should be on the Supreme Court. Because if there isn't, then why
should there be a stronger norm for the number?
Because there's no other thing that says how big the Supreme Court should be, and it seems like there needs to be some sort of policy or something that says that. And why that norm has been for a century or something, not almost a century.
The norm is also to give hearings.
There's 9 people on the court, right?
The norm is also to give hearings for judges. It's also to give hearings. So I don't understand why one norm that affects the same animated evil should be stronger or less strong than the other norm. Why? Why is it that you care more about the number of seats?
Because I don't see the difference between giving a hearing and then rejecting the candidate, or not giving, or just not giving the hearing in the first place.
So
as a severe enough thing.
You're talking about the distinction between giving a hearing and then rejecting and not giving a hearing. I'm not talking about the distinguishing between those two things. I'm trying to distinguish between not giving a hearing and adding seats. So those are the two different things that we're analyzing. One is you want to analyze the difference between giving a hearing and rejecting versus not giving a hearing. I want to give the difference between not giving a hearing and adding more seats. That's the difference I'm looking for.
Yeah, well, no, that's the difference. The difference that you're talking about is how bad is it, a violation of norms, to not give a hearing instead of giving a hearing and then saying no to all the candidates, versus
what is that
how bad is it to add seats to the court, right? That's what we're comparing.
No. Why is not giving a hearing better? Affecting
what's bad about not giving a hearing? Because we agreed, as I understand, that giving a hearing and then just voting to reject the candidate is not a violation of norms. Do you agree on that? It
will depend. I can't give you as a bad. What if
not
you
generally speaking?
So if it's all pro forma, you'd have to give me the specifics. But I don't know why that comparison is necessary when what we're actually comparing is the actual things that each.
Because that's the alternative. That's what you're saying they should have done instead of not.
No, they should have given a fair hearing, right?
Yeah, give a fair hearing and then said no,
and ruled on the merits, and not just given a pro forma hearing. I'll give a real hearing.
And presumably they could have come up with some reason that these justices.
Yeah, it has to be a good hearing. Yeah, it has to be a good and convincing hearing, because otherwise, then there would be a lot more compelling reason for people to be able to vote them out if they're not actually being honest. That's the whole point of having a hearing. They could have invented some arbitrary reason.
Well, what do you think of a hearing that would have been like, all right, Elena Kagan, you're not 6 foot, so we're going to reject you. That wouldn't be a hearing.
Pretty bad.
Okay, so what I'm talking about is to give a hearing, a real hearing, right?
Yeah.
Not some baseline pro forma hearing. Okay, the comparison is between. First of all, that comparison doesn't matter The comparison that matters is between we all agree that it was norm breaking not to have hearings. So we don't have to worry about whether it would be norm breaking to have just a bad hearing. So what we're worried about
that's important because that tells you how severe the breaking of norms is, right?
Because
it's the difference between the thing that broke the norms and something that wouldn't break the norms that would have happened otherwise. That's how severe. That's the severity, right?
How do you measure that gap between? So somehow because just having,
regardless of how we measure the gap, that's the gap we're talking about.
It's not. I have to
what
tell
is
you.
It? I don't understand.
That's the answer is it doesn't. There is no distinguishing. The how big the norm break is the question, and all you've said is it feels bigger to have a norm break of the Supreme Court adding seats as opposed to the norm break of not even having hearings for judges. Why?
Yes, because the difference is you would have ended up with the same judges potentially. I mean, there's no reason you wouldn't have if they didn't like those judges. The only consequence for them would have been that it would have been more, more high profile. They would have had to
the entire point of politics. That's the whole point of accountability. That's the entire point of it.
Not entirely, no, because
if I might offer, listen, I know calling names isn't always frowned upon and stuff like that, but let's be real. What your questioning has revealed is exactly what I said. The reason why he feels like it's a bigger deal, we all know, is because he has a slant in that political direction.
Okay.
Well, let's be real.
Let's end this. I'm ending the conversation here. It's no longer productive. I'm going to go into the next topic.
Well, it was productive until Demon Mama spoke up.
Can I ask one last question?
Yeah, it can be your final statement. We're going to start with final statements, and so we're going to start with Demon Mama.
Yeah. However you want to call it. Packing the courts, whether holding out judges, regardless, the Republican Party has blatantly and obviously tampered with the courts to attempt to inject partisan bias into the rulings. This is very clear. Their policies do not sell to the general populace of America. They only get through using technicalities hidden in various types of law that they can push through. I would argue in order to counter that type of power grab, we have to be willing. Anybody has to be willing to counter that with a power grab of their own. If the Republicans are not going to play nice, why should the Dems play nice? Simple as that. Until we're able to build a system that's more enforced, and the reason why we look at our systems and have critiques for our systems is so that we can build ones that aren't as subject to this type of political bias. But the fact of the matter is the courts are biased right now, and they're biased far to the right. And the way we fix that is by offering up solutions to that, political solutions, which could be packing the courts. So yeah, go for it. Whatever solution they find that grants the Democratic Party an equal footing so that we can actually have representation in this country, I am for that. Absolutely. Especially given all of the other things I talked about how the Republican Party has been engaging in politics over the last 2 decades or so in America.
Okay. Next, we're going to pass it over to last username.
Look, I mean, this is really a straightforward thing, and it's not at all controversial. You can find lots and lots of other people saying that packing the Supreme Court would be a very severe overreaction and would probably lead to retaliation that would be highly dangerous and destructive to the Supreme Court as an institution. I don't think this is a wildly controversial opinion. I don't think it's, and to the people saying that if you can't hear me say that without thinking that I'm a Republican shill, then I mean, get your head out of your ass for your own sake, because you can't have you can't have an objective conversation about this if that's what you have to resort to. The reason it's a more severe violation to pack the Supreme Court versus just not having hearings is because ultimately not having hearings they still had the power to reject those candidates. They still had the power to prevent those people from going on from being appointed to those courts. They just used a really cheapo, scummy way to accomplish it. But it didn't ultimately change the power that they had, right? They had the power to do that anyway without violating norms. In this case, you're violating a norm that otherwise allows you to appoint judges that otherwise you could not appoint. That's what the Democrats are talking about, right? And because of that, I think it is a far more aggressive action, and the fact that you guys Pisco, you can't tell me what you think the consequences will be indicates that. Okay, if it wasn't so severe, then you should be able to predict that the consequences won't be severe. The reason you can't is because it's a pretty big deal. And all I'm saying is you should at least understand what those consequences are before you say, I think this is a good idea. It just seems to me like this is coming from, this is a poorly thought out measure, and it's not going to work out well for you.
Okay, next I'm going to throw it over to CTV.
If any of y'all are wondering, I wear the shades because I get migraines when I look at these screens too long. That being said, whole idea for me here is reduction in the size of government. So to what Demon Mom said earlier about her concern about being able to, stay married to her wife or get married to, etc., I think that there's a new brand of conservatism that's coming around, and the whole idea of that is to get the government out of it. Because for me, I don't know why the government or why anybody should have to go ask permission from the government to get married to somebody. That should just be a decision that two free people make among themselves, and they don't need the government to check. So that's ultimately, I think, where the conservative view is going, is literally getting the government out of a lot of these issues and reducing the size of the government, right? So the idea of packing the courts because you want to continue or to try to push for more government supremacy over the people is exactly what last username is talking about whenever he says there's going to be a pushback of some kind because the people are not going to continue to stand for government supremacy, right? They want their freedom. So that is exactly where I'm at when it comes to packing the courts. We should not be considering that at all. And I am all for the brand of conservatism that continues to remove the government out of the individual's lives as much as humanly possible. Thank you.
Okay, next I'm going to be passing it over to RGR.
Oh, thank you. I had a lot more to say earlier on. I unfortunately had some questions for MNC TV and last username, but I'll try and summarize here. On the first one about the Republican Party, we're responding to Madman and CTV. So first, as a formal matter, literally just recently, Justices Thomas and Alito have come out and said that they would overturn a Bergenfeld v. Hodges if they were given the opportunity to. So let's be clear, the Republican Party is 100% behind overturning gay marriage. And also, to the broader policy question of, okay, so should we have as minimal amount of government in society as possible? The reason why this is bad logic is because it does not account for any accounting of positive and negative liberties, right? I believe in a society where we are able to maximize the amount of liberties for everyone, and that naturally requires the limitation of certain liberties of other people, namely the liberty to be able to do negative things to other people. And I would say that the cost of taking away the ability for people to discriminate against other people, against allowing them to have gay marriage, is worth the liberty of allowing people who otherwise are probably oppressed by a larger society to be able to engage in the same kind of things as everyone else does. Moving on. Actually, last username isn't here. He's coming back. I kind of want to wait for him to get here because I want to specifically, I do want to take his question. I think that there's a good faith construction of his criticism. So
he can hear you.
Oh, you can hear me? Okay, cool. So yeah, no, I'm gonna try and respond to you in good faith. All right, what would be the consequences and all of that? What's the calculus there? I agree that packing the court is bad in a pure vacuum. I think it is. I think that taken to be long term, it would lead to bad outcomes. The problem is that in order to not do it, that would assume that the system is functioning as it should, and it doesn't right now. We have people who take advantage of the system, and partisan to the point, especially Republicans who have done it. We've talked about it ad hominem. The blocking of appointees during Obama, appointing Amy Coney Barrett, even though the Republican Party had previously said that they would not want to appoint someone during the last term of presidency. There's plenty of instances of them taking advantage of the goodwill of the Democratic Party to be able to further their own appointing purposes, right? So the idea that the system is functioning as it should, namely that we shouldn't partisan appoint, is just not being true. And to the extent that it's not true and we do not currently have an alternative, I would say that court packing is necessary in order to make sure that we don't have a complete usurping of one side or the other. Because I do want to have a nonpartisan Supreme Court. I do want to have a nonpartisan court system. But unfortunately, right now we don't have objective means. So until we get to the point where we're able to get into having objective means, some possibilities I've talked to other lawyers about include, or other lawyers, I'm not a lawyer. Some possibilities I've talked to bar certified lawyers about include having rotating circuit court nominees, right? Having a rotating Supreme Court that's based on the federal circuit courts, having people from those courts going on. So it's proportional in partisanship to whoever is appointed on circuit courts. Not a perfect solution, but a better one. Or having like something like limiting of limited, like basically the limiting of district courts to be able to take on certain issues, because like there are rules that like technically the Congress is able to pass laws which limit the ability for district courts to be able to take on certain issues, which is another possibility. But until we actually employ one of those possibilities, I think that court packing is necessary, because like, yeah, in a vacuum, I don't think that court packing is a good thing to do, but that also like operates with the understanding that we have a current like otherwise immediate and viable alternative, and we just don't. So until we get that, yeah. Okay.
We're gonna throw this over next to Pisco, and Pisco, could pass it over to Madman right after. I need to get a glass of water, so I will be right back.
I'll be happy to. So I do want to apologize last username if things got a little heated. You have that effect on me. I just sort of wanted to go through the merits of why we're concerned about court packing. The reason we're concerned about court packing is its partisan implications. And that is all we're worried about here. There is some argument, right, that if we have one Supreme Court justice, that's a problem because of caseload, because it's, you know, if he gets incapacitated, that's a problem. There's also a problem on the other side, right? If there's 1,000 justices, there's problems of, well, how do we even manage a court this size? What do oral arguments look like? So there are legitimate arguments about the numbers, what they should be. But that's not what we're concerned about here with court packing. What we're fundamentally concerned about here is a partisan balance. That's it. That's all that's animating our concern for court packing. In this respect, there is no fundamental difference between a breakage of norms with respect to using a federal statute or the failure to give a discretionary hearing to a judge who's up for nomination. If it's a breakage of norms, it's a breakage of norms, and you have to explain why. One breakage of norms is more potent, or the magnitude is greater for one than another. Otherwise, if they're affecting the partisan balance, and they're both breakage of norms, I have to assume they're equivalent. Now, I happen to think it's just as bad, if not worse, not even to give a hearing to judges that are being nominated by the president. Why? At least when you're packing the court, everyone knows what you're doing. It's a more open act. It's open to the air. What Mitch McConnell did here, I think, is in many ways more nefarious than that. You're distinguishing factors that because they still have the power to have appointed the same judges, or they ultimately didn't change the level of power, are totally unavailing. I don't know what those have to do with the breakage of norms or why those factors are at all important. I listed a factor that at least being open is a better breakage of norms than being shy and closed about it. So we'd have to talk more, I think, about why your distinguishing factors way more than my distinguishing factor. Ultimately, I am worried about the outcome of this. And I'm worried that this would be a bad political move for Democrats. I'm worried about the independence of the federal judiciary, its perceived independence. That doesn't mean that it should be completely unconnected to politics. I don't want just a group of philosopher kings. I'm sure I disagree with a lot of Riley's ideas of her friends that she talked about with respect to rotating circuits or with respect to sort of cementing or institutionalizing partisan divides. I'm sure I would have problems with that as well. But that being the case, I think there's been a huge aberration and breakage of norms for the past decade, or at least since Obama's second term, maybe overstated. And that needs to be corrected. And a reasonable way it could be corrected, provided that the partisan outcomes aren't severe, would be adding a couple associate justice seats. And with that, I'll end my TED Talk.
Okay, next I'm going to throw it over to Madman.
Even though I understand pretty much the opposing ideals as to why you want to pack the court as sort of like a short-term solution to bring balance, I think, to what you're saying is a partisan court. Without restrictions as to why you're doing it, to come up with a balanced outcome, you're going to end up with rules that could very well possibly lead to solutions that you're not going to be very happy with. So I don't think changing the rules only when they are going to be like suited to your needs is a very good strategy. When the ball is in, you know, your enemy's court, you might not be very happy with the outcomes. And so that's all I have to say about it.
Okay, we're going to go on to the final topic of the night, which has to do about the Electoral College, and should we get rid of it? So I will state the statement right off the bat. Should we get rid of the Electoral College? Pisco, you're not supposed to be that happy, okay? You're the replacement. I will pass it around the room. I'm going to start this time on the bottom right-hand corner with Madman.
Oh, this is awesome. I love the Electoral College. I think it gives the little guy more representation, and I think it's really important to the way that our government works and our election process. So no, I don't think that we should get rid of it.
Okay. Next is PRGR. You are next.
I don't know. It's not a perfect system, but I also don't want to say too much because I don't have a perfect proposed alternative because I'm probably not in favor of a direct democracy. I think that what we have is a system which makes it so that basically a handful of people from a handful number of states decide basically every major election. And that's not good. That's a bad thing. We shouldn't have that because if you want a true democracy, that's not a true democracy. But I don't know. I also don't have a great alternative, so I'm not going to say too much more about it, right? Yeah, I don't know. That's basically going to be my take. It's not a great system, and it leads to a disproportionate importance of certain votes over others, which I think is undemocratic. But I also don't have a great alternative to propose. So that's my opening statement.
Okay, next I'm going to throw it over to last username.
So I don't have super strong feelings about this. I see democracy as a largely sort of arbitrary and unprincipled mechanism anyway. So a particular aspect of it being itself arbitrary and unfair is kind of lost in the mess to me. I suppose in some sense, the Electoral College is undemocratic, but I don't really care if it's undemocratic. I care about if it has a good effect on things, and it doesn't. Whether it does or not, I don't know. It's probably trying to change it would have I don't know, a negative effect. But I mean, if the effect is to sort of spread power out geographically, I don't know. It probably ends up working out for the best. But like I say, I don't really care about the ideal of democracy itself anyway. So principled arguments about the Electoral College don't have much effect on me. I really just care about, what would be the actual effects of keeping it versus getting rid of it. So I'm willing to hear out what you guys have to say about that.
Okay, next I'm going to throw it over to Demon Mama.
Yeah, I support us moving away from the Electoral College. I think that we could have there's a couple of systems that could work better. We could move to a parliamentary style system. We could move to ranked choice voting with proportional representation. Both of these systems would accomplish what Madman states is the best benefit of the Electoral College, or the seeming benefit. The Electoral College does not actually do that. And I would really urge anyone. There's a really fantastic video about this done by a really cool YouTuber called CGP Grey. One of the best videos I've ever seen on it called, I think it's literally just called the Electoral College. And it talks about how the Electoral College actually almost guarantees that smaller states get no attention. Some states, due to a number of really complicated math as far as how it goes, are literally, their citizens are worth more in votes than other states. And this also leads to a problem where the only states that get any attention on a federal election level are the swing states, states that are at risk. Otherwise, I mean, the big blue states, the big red states don't get any attention from their candidates because of the way that it's slanted. It also disproportionately punishes urban areas where the most people live. So we have some issues with the Electoral College that fly in the face of what people say its benefit is supposed to be. In truth, what the Electoral College does right now is it slants in the favor of, once again, the Republican Party, almost exclusively. And that's because it was built on principles of land ownership. And as it turns out, it's people that make up a country, not just land. So we don't live in a system that's predicated around land ownership. Thank God. I'm glad we don't live in an age of slavery and landholders being the only ones who have rights. So we should move away from a system that is built to do that. And, again, I don't have much contention. I understand why people like or think they like the Electoral College, but I assure you, the Electoral College does not do what you claim it does. It does not benefit small states. It only benefits the Republican Party, and that won't change even if small states are no longer courted by the Republican Party.
Okay, now I'm going to throw it over to CTV.
No, the Electoral College should not be abolished. We should definitely have it. I'm very glad that we do. I believe that it gets the representation needed out from more rural parts of the country versus the more densely populated cities. And I think that all of the cares and concerns of all of the people across our great land need to be heard.
Okay, next I'm going to throw it over to I think that's everybody. Yeah, I don't think. Oh wait, I forgot. The lawyer boy. Come on, go on.
Okay. The Electoral College is unjustifiable and should be abolished. For one, the system doesn't do what people think it does. And I think Demon Mama made that clear, which is it doesn't favor types of voters. It favors states, certain states. So there are plenty of rural voters in California, tons of rural voters in California, tons of rural voters in Texas as well. But those states aren't favored in the Electoral College because the favoring is for states. I think that there's plenty of state sovereignty in our country without an Electoral College. Most of what you do and you operate your life on is governed by state law for the most part, with some exceptions, of course. But how you sort of live your day to day is largely governed by state law. That doesn't go away if all of a sudden there's a direct electoral vote for the president. I don't see the argument how it could be theoretically possible to win the Electoral College with something below 30% of the popular vote. That doesn't seem to be justifiable. That is even theoretically possible. So really the argument needs to be made, why should smaller states be favored over bigger states in that system? I don't think there's a good answer. I think stretched to the limits, we would be shocked if a state that said, let's say that the state had 10 people as opposed to another state which had 300 million, that somehow those two states should have equal say in what's going on in the country. I think we would be shocked, rightly so, because we know that what really matters is a mandate from the masses, not a mandate from these individual sovereigns, which can keep on to their powers if they so choose. Now, this isn't going to appeal to someone like Last Username, who doesn't care about democracy as a sort of, philosophical end in and of itself, which in some sense I can be sympathetic to. But I think that also having a direct popular vote is better as a utilitarian end. One is, I think, the elections in which it has been decided on an Electoral College victory as opposed to popular vote victory, we would have been better off had they been decided the other way. So that's a history. It doesn't necessarily prove that in the future it's going to be like that. But I think the fact that we would at least have a reliable sort of something to hang your hat on, which is the popular vote, and that if situations change such that distribution of Electoral College is much, much more unequal than it is even now, we could rely on sort of the dictates of the majority of the people guiding us, not leading us astray. So for those reasons and others, I think the system should be abolished and we should have a direct popular vote.
Okay. RGR and Pisco, could you both disconnect and reconnect to the whereby you've both begun freezing
Sure.
a little bit. So I would just want to try to get better video quality. But the general conversation is now open. You may engage.
Yeah.
Well,
Oh, go ahead.
I think Pisco had said something about like if a state had, I think he said literally like 10 people, and then a state had 30 million. Did I hear you correct? That they
So,
would have equal representation?
So this is a hypothetical to test the limits of why states should matter. And so imagine a country with 10 people, or sorry, a state with, let's make it up so it's a little bit more believable. Let's say it's 1,000 people in that state. Everybody moves out of Wyoming. Let's say that there's like a volcano that happens, and people are forced to move out except for like the scientists working on it. And then the rest of the states all come into like one state or something. Should that state of 1,000 people have the same vote as the rest of, greater California, whatever you want to call it?
But that's not how it works. They get,
I know
that they get the electors get divided out differently. I mean,
so they would have way more. I understand that it's not the principle is the same though, right? That you would be having disproportionately more say. At least, for instance, in the Senate, you would have the same say as that other state, and that informs how the Electoral College is divided. Is what I'm saying.
Sure, but the lifestyle and everything could be very different between the people that live in Wyoming versus how people are living in.
So what would you say to someone who says that, like, California has rural voters? California has more rural voters in California than the rural voters out in, Wyoming. Why should they be? They're not counted by Wyoming's rural voters. So why aren't their votes? First of all, I don't know as a normative matter that we should value rural voters over urban voters. That hasn't been made clear to me. But even if we should, why then is the line between states?
Right. It's about equal representation.
Well, it's not equal. It's purposely unequal.
Yeah, it is literally objectively unequal. Like, I mean,
No,
somebody who lives in LA, their vote is objectively
across the land, right? I mean, unless you want us to, come into the cities and bring the fucking cows in on the streets so that you can clean up the shit.
This is not an argument.
Everybody's got to eat, right? So there are people that have to take care of certain things, i.e., farming, and there are business, in different parts of the country. For those people that are not a part of those major.
Why should that matter more than the
densities of population? You have to figure out how to have an equal amount of voices across the land.
But it's unequal, right?
So Electoral College accomplishes that.
Listen,
no, it doesn't.
Farmers,
you're valuing certain lives more than others in the electoral process. That's what you're doing. You are valuing some lives more than others, just based purely on where they're located.
Correct?
Yeah, as it stands right now. Yes,
you are. You are signing less electoral power to certain people.
You're doing that.
You're literally doing it. You're saying that by virtue of living in a city, that your vote has less power than people who don't live in a city. That's what you're saying. That's literally the argument.
No, what I'm saying is that you need a consensus across the entire land.
You're not even addressing the point. Oh my god, you're literally not even addressing the point. Holy shit, dude. Holy fucking shit.
The typical kind of argument for the Electoral College, I understand, is that it forces you to have to appeal to, let's say, voting blocks that cut across states, right? Sorry?
But it doesn't do that because, as was, I think, greatly explained by Demon Mama, it doesn't force you to have a broad consensus across different places. It forces you to go to where there's
not consensus, but it resists things like having a candidate who only appeals to urban voters or a candidate who only appeals to rural voters.
Wait, hold on a second. This is a really important thing, real quick, that I want to. Oh, sorry, I didn't mean to talk over you.
You're good.
Oh, okay. I was just gonna say it's really important. As it stands right now, the way the Electoral College works is urban voters are literally worth less per vote. Your vote, if you live in a city, if you happen to live in a city, you are worth
one
less.
Of the effect it has.
Yeah. Then I think it's like, I can't remember the exact state right off the top of my head. But like, I want to say it's Wyoming or Wisconsin is worth like 3 votes to a vote of somebody who lives in LA, which is like 9.98.
Right. So here's the point, right? So you live in the city, right? Your voice means less there because that's where that fucking land is, right? So if you want your voice to mean more, move out to the rural parts where there's less people and this big ass fucking land that we got, right? So there has
People are,
to
yeah,
be
that's a great
line
idea.
that is
20,
Just move
yeah,
5
10 out of
head.
10.
Just move.
Just move 5 head.
land, and that's exactly how you do that, right? So if you don't want to really engage with how the actual structure of the land is, right, then
This
you
is
just
not
want
an
to
argument. You understand?
No, and
Wait,
that's not what
CTV,
we are.
genuine question, CTV. Do you
Republic.
genuine question?
Okay,
Genuine
let me hear,
question.
let me hear the question.
Okay, genuine question. Ready? Do you believe that there is a difference between a person and land?
Is that a real question?
Yes, that's a real question. Because right now, the argument you're making does not seem to care.
Flat or round?
Did you think
That's
that was a
a real
dunk or something? I guess you can't answer the question. I mean, here's the thing. Land isn't what matters. It's people that matter. And also the argument that you can just get up and move when like people need
No,
Yeah, it's not an
not
argument.
really.
People need jobs. Like there's more than just like you can't just up
Yeah,
and disappear
there's a
into
whole
the
lot of
rural
jobs
area.
They need
Like-
to be filled in more rural
And
areas.
also, wait, hold on. There's another
Right,
problem though.
there's
Wait, there's
jobs.
another problem. I know you're really
There's a whole
jumping at
bunch
it.
of
But
different situations that we can go through and all this and then be able to play it all out. But at the end of the day, right, what you need as far as a voting block is, right, or how you're getting the votes collected, right, you need to make sure that you have equal representation based off of a myriad of things that would need to be considered. And the Electoral College does that while also giving us a good consensus across the entire nation.
it doesn't do that.
on what he wants. And you
It
know
doesn't
what?
do that.
We have a
And there's another
prime
problem.
example of
Wait,
that
there's
in
another problem.
2000.
There's another problem. There's another problem.
Whenever
Wait,
President
come on now.
I would like
Trump
to, I would
won
like
the
to hear the
electoral
end of his.
election,
You can continue.
I
You
heard
can continue.
Dylan. Okay. When President Trump won the election, right? But he didn't win the popular vote, and that's not even the first time in history that that's happened. And that's why exactly it's
argument.
important for you to have a representation across the land rather than in population densities and cities.
It's really
Trump won,
funny.
so the system works. I'm not sure if that's the argument that you think that it is. I'm not sure
Yeah.
if that's the sinker that you think it is. I'm sorry. I'm not sure if Trump won, so the system works is the way that you want to take this. Like, I'm not sure. Yeah.
It's
I'm
really
not
funny.
sure if
I mean,
yeah,
not-
yeah, like,
not to-
I was not concerned about you.
All I did was point out that is not the first time in history that has
Doesn't
happened.
matter, right? That's
And I gave you a clear example that's recent so that you could understand what it was that I was talking about.
Yeah, I think
Whether or
that
not-
shows that it doesn't work. That's kind of the point.
whether or not it's happened in recent history isn't an argument addressing whether or not the Electoral College, by its terms, allows for a wide spectrum of
The
representation.
majority of the country wants Trump as president, and that's why he got elected because
didn't happen.
he
The
got the
majority
votes
did not.
across the majority of the states, which constitute the land. Right?
Because he
And-
took advantage of the Electoral
You know,
College.
Weasley-
Yeah, sure.
Here, now, if I can have a second to respond to all this stuff that CTV has been saying, it's really funny because I feel like I jumped forward in time when I was giving my opening statement where I talked about how the Electoral College only exists to serve the Republican Party, and you demonstrated that by saying that Donald Trump won, even though he didn't win the popular vote by a large margin. So by definition, Donald Trump being president right now means that the majority of people in this country were not given the representative right. Now, keep in mind, all of this, again, all of this is talking about the Electoral College. The Electoral College only affects the presidency and what the presidency can then affect. So there are other ways for us to do representation. I also support, mind you, getting rid of the Senate because I think the Senate has the same problems that the Electoral College does, which is that certain states are given an advantage when they shouldn't be. And,
Or start.
Yeah. And then a third thing, which is that you're in response again to your ridiculous just move 5 head response. It's really funny because if everybody moved out to that rural area, that rural area would become worth less because of the Electoral College. So you're shooting yourself in the foot. The system just sucks. You only
careful.
defend it because it wins the Republican Party.
Right, so it would be working perfectly. So, like I said,
No,
right?
Do you know?
No,
did
it
you-
would.
Let him
People
Pisco,
across the land.
you gotta let him respond to that. That was like a
Right.
3.123 at him. You can't just jump in and like really do 5, 4, 5, 6. You gotta let him, counter. You can continue, CTV. Sorry.
Right. So the point is that the more that the people move to different places, the Electoral College would account for that. It
No, it
just would. It would because there's a process that decides how many votes that the electorals get.
Because
Right?
actually, Demon Mama was slightly wrong because she was assuming there, or maybe she said, as city urban people go out to the rural parts, that their vote will count more and it'll be balancing. But it's
Mhm.
actually, remember, it's not that. It's states. It's states. So it's not types of voter. It's states. So I think she's reading into it, moving to another more rural state. But keep in mind, you going from a city out to the rural areas, they're not going to change anything if you're in an arbitrary state line that we've just decided that the rural voters in Wyoming matter more than the rural voters in California.
Misspeak on my part. Yes.
Yeah. So I just want to be
The
clear.
fact that
Why should states
California?
matter?
Yeah, but the fact that California or New York, they have X amount of, and I think it's 29 for, or maybe 35 for California, 21 for New York, I think. I'm not sure, so don't quote me.
Electoral
Right,
vote?
but it's because of a lot of the population densities that takes into account for the number of electoral votes that they
Have
get,
less,
right?
they have less than they should, right? If it was
Less
pure,
than they should.
if it was pure represent,
Are
I'm
you
not
saying that we should have a higher number than how many? So like 270 is the breaker because they figure that out. I mean, so you're saying
would-
that the electoral college needs to account for population and electoral votes in a different way?
Yeah, that's my. I think we should abolish. I want to let Riley talk because Riley. I'm
So
sorry.
I'm not sure if I have too much to add actually.
Okay.
Yeah, you're good.
Okay. So CTV, if it's the case, as it is the case, that the Electoral College doesn't favor types of voters, it favors states. Why should that be the case? Why should you favor certain types of rural voters over other types of rural voters who live out in big states? That doesn't make sense, right? The interests of the rural farmers in California aren't the interests of the rural farmers in the Midwest necessarily.
Mm-hmm.
One maybe
Right.
more about
Well, hold
water.
on. Let's make sure we keep it in the framework, right? So you're still saying there needs to be some type of electoral college process.
No, I don't. I want to get rid of it, but I'm challenging your view of why the Electoral College.
So then you don't think that there should be some type of representation across the population,
Right.
taken into
Right.
consideration.
I'm saying the system that you would prefer would be something like, okay, we're going to assign electoral votes, and we're going to, if you say on the census that you're a rural voter, you get 2 votes. And if you
actually
say,
say that in the census.
what I mean to say is like we'd have to if you really wanted what you wanted, you would be okay saying if you identify as a rural voter and we can prove you're a rural voter, your vote should just matter more. That should be what you're saying. It's not.
That's not how it works, though.
It's not how it works.
It's not how the electoral college works, right?
I understand that's not how it works. I'm saying if you
Right.
really
So
cared about.
So then let's do this, right? Because you love hearing yourself talk. So why don't you explain to me how the electoral college works, man? Explain to me how it decides the number of votes that it's going to get, right? Why California has 35 or whatever the case is. How did they come up with that when it comes to the population densities across the land inside that state? So
every state gets electoral college votes equal to the number of representatives they have plus the number of senators they have. In addition, DC gets a certain number of, I forget, electoral votes as well. So that is how that's broken down. As you know, CTV, the Senate, every state has 2 senators, right? So by virtue of, regardless of your size, by virtue of the fact that you have an equal number of senators, regardless of size, and that's factored into your number of electoral votes, that necessarily means that smaller states have more representation than bigger states. You understand that, right? Okay. So what's being favored here is states with small populations. Why? If what we care about is a cross-sectional group of different...
Well, there's that. There's also the effect that I mean, all that you get all or nothing essentially with each state, right? So you need, if you get 51% of the votes in the state,
that's not necessary, right?
It's not necessary, but that's how all the states do it right now, I think, right?
Yeah, except for Nebraska and Maine.
Right. So what you're saying is that perhaps maybe a different way to do it would be to have, maybe a greater percentage of the votes need to go before, like say 66% of the votes need to go one way or the other.
No,
otherwise the electoral vote should be split into,
You're not hearing me. So what I'm saying is the argument for that last year's name put that is commonly put, he was just presenting the argument that's often given, is that the Electoral College forces you really to get a cross section of America. You have to appeal to urbanites. You have to appeal to rural people. You have to appeal to the suburbs. And my contention is it doesn't by its terms, because it favors statehood. It doesn't favor any particular arrangement.
Are you saying that it doesn't do you encourage that more than the alternative of not having an electoral college? You have more of a cross section with it than without.
It doesn't have an opinion on it. It's officially neutral on it. It's an accident of history that the small states are what they are and have the proportions they have. And were it some other way, were history some other way, were geography some other way, you would see a different cross section that's being favored by the Electoral College. Or maybe a more uniform one. Maybe winning the Electoral College.
Well, it just so happens that each state tends to have a mixture of urban and rural voters and various other distinctions among voters. So if you force politicians to campaign in across states, then you're also forcing them to campaign across these different.
You would have to do that if it was a
to some
vote.
Extent. It's not perfect, obviously.
But they don't even do that though. They don't even do that right now.
Imagine. So think about the three decisive states in the last electoral election was Michigan, Wisconsin, Pennsylvania, right? So those states are often referred to the kind of voter base in like one term, right? The Midwestern rural, whatever white voter, or I don't know how you spell voter, right? If you're okay with that term being labeled around and you're okay with political analysis that talks about these states in those terms, then it looks like what was decisive was one section of voters. Essentially, one group of voters decided the outcome of the election because the other ones were baked in. That's, I think, the argument why the Electoral College doesn't, by its terms, require you to have a nice cross-section. Now, it just so happens the winner of the Electoral College in recent years has come from a diverse set of states. But it's just an accident, right?
There's another angle too of looking at this, which is that like even in states with like that are safe states, so to say, candidates tend to go to the urban centers because they that's cheaper. And what they're trying to do is go to the swing states, spend all their money in the swing states that matter because of this ridiculously outdated system. They'll go to those handful of swing states, ignore everywhere else, and ignore rural areas in states that are like safe. Like, for example, in California, you'll see like 100 presidential stops in LA, 100 presidential stops in San Francisco, and like one in like, I don't know, like
they don't go there.
Yeah, like thinking like what, like fucking, I don't even know the towns I'm trying to think of without like telling where I used to live.
But the reason swing states are swing states is because they're so closely divided, right? If you didn't have this, now, if you didn't have the aspect where it's an all or nothing for each state, then wouldn't you have more candidates saying, well, why am I going to bother with these swing states when I can just get more votes from some state that's already really friendly to me? And
that would also be a huge improvement.
States.
That would be.
Do you think that would be an improvement?
That would be essentially.
Wouldn't that just be more divisive, though? I mean,
no, that would be essentially a popular vote, right? If all states are proportional, and
but it would be more. Wouldn't it lead to more regional campaigning?
What's that?
Right now, like if you can only get, if you get 51% of the votes in California, you get 100% of the electoral from California. If it was by population, then you could get potentially twice as many votes from California by pushing it above that 51%.
Correct.
So wouldn't that system tend to encourage more regional voting? Like, let's just get even more votes in the places we're already popular, rather than trying to look at places that are more divided.
So what? I mean, so I see something in the chat, like they're saying if you don't live in California, New York, fuck you, basically. New York and California, I hate to break it to you, don't make up half the population of the country. I don't know who thinks they do. They don't. And you wouldn't. Yes, it would encourage you to get turnout from big, heavy states, maybe, but why shouldn't it? And these candidates don't care about Rhode Island anyway.
It depends on what your goals are, right?
They're not going to Rhode Island anyway. They're not going to small states anyway. As we said,
what do you think makes
well, here's the thing, though. The difference, though, is that it would incentivize politicians to seek votes and not to seek ringing the bells right in this like outdated electoral system. What they're incentivized to do is to do this little funny dance where they touch certain states and ignore completely other states. Whereas if it's a popular vote system or something like ranked choice, with with what the fuck, I can't even think of the word, proportional representation or parliamentary system or any of those other systems would encourage them to seek the votes, the actual people. So there would be a benefit for, say, like, hey, what if, I don't know, like pick a random candidate, Joe Biden or whatever, decides to do a drive through rural America and go visit all these places, win over the hearts of all these people. Those votes now matter. Those votes actually matter because those are the votes that'll decide it. Yeah, sure. It's still going to be, you're still going to have a lot of incentivization to go to large urban centers because there's a lot of people there. There's a lot of people there. So yeah, it's always going to be important. This makes it more valuable to seek the votes. It builds an incentive system that encourages presidential candidates to listen to all the people in the country. The way that it is right now, they don't do that. They do the little dance, they ring the right bells, and then maybe it happens.
I don't think I think they're more inclined to listen to a greater variety of people under the current system than
Why?
Why?
Because a popular vote system gives you more flexibility in choosing where to get your votes from. So it gives you more options to appeal to specific interest groups to get your votes. If I want to be a party that just appeals to these specific people, I can do that because every vote that I get from that interest group counts, no matter where in the country it is. Right?
Through the system, we just appeal to people from a handful number of states, right? Like only people from like a handful number of states, regardless of their particular like whatever. Like that already happens. Like that's a criticism that currently exists.
And it's way.
The only reason you have to appeal to the states where people are divided, right?
Why should you have to do that?
But that under the current system.
Yeah, but there are people divided across the entirety of the country, right?
And
there are people
more
like
you can't just appeal to any states you want, right?
Yeah, having lived in rural California,
make any difference.
Yeah, you have to under like, now mind you, I'm not sure if I am in favor of like a direct democracy, but that would at least solve the problem of people having to actually care about people from across the entirety of the country as opposed to just in a handful number of states.
Riley, respectfully, it wouldn't be a direct
effect.
democracy. It would still be a representative government. It would still be federalism, right? You'd still have state governments who opine on state law. So I don't think it would crush the federal government under the Buddhist small states. I think about it right now. Someone needs to answer this question. Rhode Island isn't taken account of at all in the election. Neither is Montana, right? So if the argument is, well, smaller states should have more representation because they'll be catered to more, how can you think that? I have to wonder. Does anyone have an answer for that?
Of land that the state holds versus the population.
All amount of land, right? Nothing to do with land. It's all population.
Clearly, it has something to do with land.
It has nothing to do with
because
land.
the Electoral College votes are split up between what? The states. So clearly, population does matter, right?
No, because Rhode Island is a very small land, but proportionally has more representation than a bigger land state.
Right. So like there's a population, right, and then the smaller the state, the bigger the influence, and then there's a bigger state than the smaller, right?
No, but
so
a huge
like
state, a huge state like Alaska. A huge state like Alaska
to be able to account for these things.
No. Alaska is physically, I think, the biggest state. Am I wrong about that? I think Alaska is physically the biggest state in the union, and it has.
It's large.
I mean, so population-wise, I think
it's all population. Well, no, he said land, so I just want to. It's nothing to do with land. It's state boundaries, and it doesn't matter how much land is in there. It matters how much people is in there. Right? CTV, what am I saying that you don't like?
I just don't think you understand, and I think that you're just arguing to be arguing.
You said land.
He's literally
wait,
just
CTV,
explaining
are you drunk?
No, not yet.
Are you sure? You've been drinking.
I
don't know.
Yeah, I guess one shot. I mean,
I mean, like you're literally telling someone who studies the law that they don't know what they're talking about when you don't have any experience. And when they're literally just describing what the Electoral College is, like this isn't anything disputable. Like this is just like how it's set up. Like it's based on population. Like that's how it is.
It's set up to get representation across the land based off of population.
You didn't use land that way, but I'll let you slide. You didn't use it as the land to get a cross-sectional. You're saying the Electoral College depends on land. We can run it back, but I won't do that now.
No, it's one of those where if you want to try to, just dissect and, but
I'm hearing you, I'm responding to you.
That's all I want you to do is I want you to hear me and not get hung up on the language, right? Otherwise, we could just sit here and argue language all fucking day.
I need to know what you mean, and I need to know that you're not making a huge.
You might want to just be clear then.
College does a great job of representing the voices of the people inside the states, which constitute the land, right? So where the population densities are across the land inside the states, they get votes based off of that, right?
So you get votes based on your population and the fact that you're a state, or if you're DC. So the fact that you're a state gives you 2 electoral votes already, and the rest are decided based on your House of Representatives, right? So
Okay.
the question is, why should states have an inherent value added over and above the people living in the state? And remember, it's a zero-sum game. Any votes you give to someone are votes you take away from someone else if you're not doing right. Do you understand that, CTV?
Right. And do you understand that states constitute different amounts of land?
Oh my god, we're going into the results with this guy. You literally can't fucking understand how the Electoral College works. Holy fuck.
So here's the question: why shouldn't states have this default?
I'll
number of
tell
votes?
you. Okay.
Okay.
Because states already have their sovereignty. They're assumed sovereign. They're already taken care of, right? And you're double counting people by emphasizing their states above and beyond the people in them. So I'm not worried about the states. States will be fine, right?
But you're assuming the job of the president is to represent the people rather than the states. But why is that exactly?
So the president, I think, has a job to represent. Listen. I think the basis of sovereignty in the United States Constitution is people, and in our national system, especially after Civil War, the president is answerable to the people. As a matter of public policy, the president should be more worried about people's well-being than states' well-being. If there's a state, I'd rather care about 20 million people dying in one state as opposed to 1 million people dying in another state. I wouldn't care about the state divide there and say these are equally bad, right? I have a bias, I must say, a substantive bias towards people. That's why I think the president should represent people.
I mean, it doesn't say specifically why the president's role should be to represent.
Because that's like enshrined in our Constitution.
And it leads to the best outcomes, I think.
Well, I mean, no. What's enshrined in the Constitution is the electoral, the way it works now, status quo.
No. The role of the president is different than the enshrinement of the. You asked why should the president focus on representing the people, and I think it's different to say that his role as chief executive, I think, is of that of all the people. I don't think he interacts with the states on the same level as he does with the people. He only interacts with states insofar as he's sort of hedged in by. What I want to say is he's already hedged in by the states by the mere fact that legislation has to pass bicameral presentment, and so he already has the sort of limitation of the Senate, and now that's being double counted on his own election. So the influence of the states is being doubled, essentially, is what my argument is, and I think that influence is improper. Does that make sense?
I understand what you're saying. Yeah.
Okay. So why should we? Again, I present you the hypothetical, which we are essentially living in, where a state of a very small number of people compared to a state of a very, very large people. There's a reason why we care about the state with with a large population, I think, and I think there's good reasons why we care about those.
Okay, I don't want to just throw it in there at a point that was super chaotic. Now let's calm down a little bit. We are getting near to the 11:30 mark, so it looks like we're going to start doing outros. So you can not only give your ending position on this, you can also shout yourself out. So I'm going to start with Operation Madman.
Okay. I think the Electoral College is important. Like I said, it's to represent represent the small guy. I'm sorry. I'm extremely tired at this point of the night. The founding fathers built the Electoral College because they knew that democracies were dangerous. I think they had described it as being two wolves and a lamb deciding what to eat for dinner, or deciding what to eat for dinner. I think it was not in so many words, but that's how they described a straight democracy. So that's why they set up the Electoral College. It's a great system. I would hate to see it abolished. My outro would be that I do some political streams, play guitar sometimes. I've done Russian streams recently. Sometimes we doodle and just hang out. So yeah, come and hang out. That's it.
Wonderful. If you want to post your link in chat, you are perfectly allowed to. I'm going to throw it out over to last username.
Okay, so like I said at the beginning, I don't have super strong feelings about the Electoral College. I mostly just wanted to see, what you guys had to say about it. But currently, I tend to sort of lean towards like being okay with it. There's different aspects to it that have different effects. The first past the post aspect, the aspect that you either get all of the electors in the state or none, means that once you get 51% of the votes effectively in a state, there's no more benefit to trying to get any more votes in that state for the states that actually work that way, which is most of them. And that seems to me that would have the effect of forcing candidates to appeal more broadly to states, since there's less benefit to concentrating on specific states. That aspect I see as a good thing. Of course, that's going to be dependent on the kind of government that I like. And as a libertarian, I like a government that is fairly stable and predictable and very limited in what it does, not a government that is, can appeal to very special interest groups to get power and act on those special interests. So that's probably where we're gonna have differences. So like, while the Electoral College doesn't make sense, I understand if you believe in the principles of democracy, Electoral College seems pretty bizarre and arbitrary, but I don't. And on balance, it seems like it probably does more good than harm, I think, based on what I understand of it. So there you go.
Okay, now I'm going to throw it over to Pisco.
Thank you. To address last username, well, first of all, thank you, Dylan, so much for hosting this and for inviting me on last minute. This is a lot of fun, and I felt like
No
it got
problem,
very
buddy.
fiery. And I just wanted to say to all the panelists here, thank you for coming on and engaging with us. I had a lot of fun. On the merits, I am also against the first past the post nature of our electoral system. Last username, I think Demon Mama was right on the money when there needs to be some sort of ranked choice voting or some kind of runoff election system. Not only would that get us away, I think, from this dangerous and ultimately futile two-party system, I think it would also allow new voices and ideas to be heard and take away some of the more, I think, not so great aspects of party politics in this country. Electoral College, I think, as it currently stands, doesn't do what its purported benefits are, which is to give a good cross-sectional analysis. I understand that this reasoning about the Electoral College is totally post hoc. The real reason why we have the Electoral College is to get the small states to sign on board the original Constitution, as well as to make sure that states, the founders knew we were going to have new states out in the West, and they wanted reasons for keeping them in the fold and not having schisms in their confederacy, small c confederacy, the union, essentially. So that's the real reason we have it, because we wanted the small states to sign on board, and we wanted to have buy-in from future states of our country, which would have a small population. I would posit to the panel and to the viewers that those incentives aren't really there anymore. We see ourselves more as a national government. Just ask yourselves, compared to local elections and national elections, what kind of elections animate people to go vote? They're much more engaged in national politics than they are in local politics, I think, from my cursory viewing. And that being the case, I think our federal government should reflect that change in preference, and seen as the Electoral College incentivizes things that are bad, namely focusing on swing states, and doesn't have any other corollary benefits that I can see, namely reaching out to a nice cross-section of the country. I think it should be abolished permanently and replaced with the direct popular vote. Thank you.
Okay.
And Pisco 95, twitch.tv, whatever.
Yep, twitch.tv/Bastiat. I'm going to throw it over to Demon Mama.
Thank you. The Electoral College, again, we went back and forth on a lot of things, but the main point remains that the Electoral College does not achieve what people want it to. It has been sold by the Republican Party as this sort of thing that represents states' rights or something. It doesn't do that. What it does is actually ensures that rural voters in big states get ignored, and that, in fact, lots of voters get ignored. And it does guarantee that the Republican Party can sort of cheese their way into power again and again and again. And they've done that a whole lot, it seems. It's almost like they just can't win a fair election. And that's what I would like you all to think about, is recognize that the electoral college system is not giving you the representation that you deserve, especially if you happen to live in one of the states that's currently objectively underrepresented. I oppose the Electoral College. It is an elitist institution that doesn't care for the people of the United States of America. It only benefits one group, the Republican Party. My name is Demon Mama Live here on Twitch. I'm going to drop my links in the chat here in just a second. It's been wonderful being here with you all tonight. And afterwards, I always do a Q&A. So if you're looking for something to watch afterwards, come on and hop over. We're going to be talking with Aiko a little bit, if any of you know Aiko. So feel free to come chill in my chat afterwards and shoot me a follow. Much love, and thank you.
Demon Mama, are you suggesting that people should not be in my offline chat, just seething at the opportunity for me to go live again this Monday?
I mean, I'm not saying that, but if they want something to do in the meantime,
So maybe in another tab, slightly on, while they just stare at my offline chat, shaking eyes, bulging, just waiting. Right? Okay, good. Okay, we're gonna throw it over to RGR next.
Yeah, I don't know. I thought that Demon Mama, and Pisco made some really good arguments, and I sent on to basically most of them. I don't know. I found them very convincing. Overall, I think that the Electoral College does not accurately or fairly represent the small guy, especially just because it does represent small things. It represents small states in particular, but people who live out in the country or who are underrepresented in states where, for example, their votes would not matter, the Electoral College doesn't care about them at all, right? Another flaw of the system is that practically, since states are all or nothing, it means that only a handful of states actually decide any national election, and I feel like that only further adds to the undemocratic nature of it. And if people are able to just game those few particular states and not have to focus on others, then it tends to lead to unfair outcomes. I don't know what the alternative is, which is the reason why I wasn't too invested in this particular subject, but I think that you're able to criticize the system and recognize that there are flaws with it without necessarily having an alternative or being able to talk with other people as if those are two separate issues. I think that one is pretty open and shut to my end, but I don't know. I'm probably going to be talking with other people more about what a good alternative is. So yeah, it's my bit. Oh, and my name is Riley Grace Roshong, RGR. You can just Google me. I'm on Twitch, Twitter, YouTube, all that good stuff. I do politics and memes and law stuffs. Yeah, it's a good time. Thank you for having me on, Dylan. It was a good time.
No problem. Oh, I also know you sent me a DM talking about maybe us just doing a Maryland politics stream, since we're both Maryland natives active locally, and that sounds like a blast. I'd love to do that.
100%. Let's talk more about it.
I'll send you a thing about some of the stuff I've done. There was actually recently, I haven't given the shout out. There was a guy called Splinters on Twitch who actually did a mini documentary on me and the stuff I've done in Maryland politics. For the Mike Gravel campaign, for the congressional campaigns and all that.
It's really good.
Yeah. Wait, you've seen it, Madman? Mm-hmm. Oh, well, thank you very much. So I got to give my boy Splinters a shout out. If anybody wants to check him out, I'll probably I'll post this thing in chat before I give CTV a little bit of time to give his outro, say his position, and save this panel with his amazing takes.
Well, I try to be a critically thinking veteran. I'm on Twitter at original_CTV if you want to argue with me. I have been known to go on Riley's Twitter and argue with her. Oh, you didn't even notice? That's cool. See, be that way. I can't believe that. I mean,
wait, I'm sorry. I'm sorry. Actually, I legit didn't notice. I'm sorry.
Hold on, my time to speak. I'm just saying it's like I take the time to go over there and try to interact, and we can't even get. You didn't even know. Like, man, that's so mean. Right, but it's all right. I won't hold that against you. So the Electoral College has been working for a long time. It's been. If you study the history of it, it's what one way in certain elections, and then another way it's went the completely opposite, right? And it all has to do with the way that ideas move around the country and how they're represented inside the states across the nation, right? So this thing is working. I don't see any reason to change it, and it kind of goes back to that old motto: if it ain't broke, don't fix it, right? And it ain't broke, so we ain't going to fix it. And if you don't like how that is set up, right? This is the United States. You can make a choice to go live somewhere else, but this is our Constitution, and if you don't like it, go somewhere else. I'm okay. I'm completely okay with that. You can make the best choice for you. But as far as here, that's how it is, and that's how it's going to be.
Okay, I think we've just had a panel show. I appreciate you all coming on. You may all now scatter into the wind as I bring my giant money bags over the mountain behind all of your backs.